On my birthday, my daughter gave me a mechanical watch. My wife scoffed, calling it an old beat-up thing from a flea market. Then one day the watch suddenly disappeared. My daughter immediately called me, her voice trembling. "Don't look for it anymore. Dad, leave the house quickly. My husband is waiting for you in the woods behind the house." The truth behind it left me utterly speechless. This story isn't easy to tell, but it matters. Before we start, would you drop a comment and tell me, have you ever had someone you trusted turn out to be a stranger? Your perspective helps more than you know. Some details here are fictionalized to protect privacy and strengthen the lesson, but the heart of what happened, that's real. I had drunk that cup of honey tea every morning for 25 years, but the third time my hand trembled holding it, I knew something was wrong. The ceramic mug felt heavier than it should have. At 68, I had spent 40 years building Langley Farm from nothing, and 25 years believing my wife Constance shared that dream with me. My right hand shook as I lifted the tea to my lips, not violently, just a fine tremor that made the golden liquid ripple in the October morning light streaming through the kitchen window. Constance, 65, and chief accountant of our farm for all 25 years of our marriage, stood at the kitchen sink with her back turned washing dishes as she had every morning. Her hands moved in steady circles over a plate, and she hummed something soft I didn't recognize. "Are you all right, dear?" she asked without turning around. "Your hand is shaking." I set the mug down on the oak table we bought together in 1998. Just old age catching up, I suppose. Nothing to worry about. She dried her hands on a dish towel and finally turned to face me. Constance had aged well, gray streaks through dark hairlines around her eyes that deepened when she smiled like she did now. "You should rest more. 40 years is enough. Let the farm run itself." The farm couldn't run itself. 500 acres of Iowa farmland, 37 supply contracts for our beeswax operation, 14 employees who depended on my decisions every week. But I nodded and drank the tea anyway. It tasted like it always did, honey and chamomile, slightly bitter herbs. Constance said helped with inflammation, my grandmother's recipe she'd told me years ago. The trembling stopped after breakfast. I went out to check the beeswax factory operations, supervised the morning crew, loading shipping pallets, reviewed the accounting ledgers Constance had left on my desk. Everything normal, everything as it had been for decades. But my hands had shaken, third time this week. I didn't mention it to anyone. What was there to say I was 68? Bodies broke down. That's what they did. 3 days later, on the first weekend of October, my daughter came to the farm for my birthday. My daughter Vivica, 38 and sharper than I'd ever given her credit, handed me a watch on my birthday with eyes that said more than her words. The living room filled with afternoon light, and I could see through the windows into the garden where 5-year-old Chloe, my granddaughter with her mother's dark eyes and her own fierce opinions about marshmallow size, ran through the garden, chasing the farm dog with pure joy. Brent, my son-in-law of 15 years, and a man who never used 3 words when silence would do, stood by the window watching Chloe play in the garden. "Happy birthday, Dad," Vivica said, holding out a small wrapped box. I opened it at the dining room table, while Constance brought out coffee and the birthday cake she'd baked that morning, German chocolate, my favorite. The box contained a watch, not digital, mechanical, automatic movement, white dial, brown leather strap, heavy for its size. I turned it over. My name engraved on the back, Horace Benjamin Langley. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." "Just wear it, Dad." Vivica's voice stayed light, but her eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made me pause. "All the time. Please." Constance leaned over my shoulder to look at the watch, and I caught the scent of her perfume, the same lavender she'd worn for 25 years. Vivica didn't look at her stepmother. She kept her eyes on me. "I had it engraved. I want you to wear it, every day." I had no way of knowing that by the time my next birthday came around, I would understand exactly why my hands had been shaking. I fastened the watch around my left wrist. The leather strap was soft, well made. The watch face was clean and simple, no complications, just hour and minute hands and a second hand that swept smoothly around the dial. Mechanical precision. 42 ticks per minute. "It's perfect," I said. "I'll wear it every day." Brent spoke for the first time since arriving. "Good watch, reliable." Chloe ran in from the garden, breathless and grass-stained, carrying something cupped in her small hands. "Grandpa, I found a beetle. His name is Jeffrey." I bent down to admire Jeffrey the beetle, while Chloe explained his complex backstory involving a kingdom and a quest. Vivica watched me still with that strange intensity in her expression. Constance cut the cake and served it with coffee, and we sat in the living room like a normal family celebrating a normal birthday. But nothing about that afternoon was normal. If you have ever received a gift that felt like a warning, you know the weight I felt when that leather strap closed around my wrist. Vivica and her family left before dinner. She hugged me at the door and whispered, "Don't take it off, not even to sleep." Why, I asked. She pulled back and smiled, and too bright, too quick. "Because I want to know you're thinking of me." That wasn't the real answer. I knew it. She knew I knew it. But Brent was already loading Chloe into the car, and Constance was calling from the kitchen that dinner would be ready in 30 minutes, and the moment passed. Vivica held my gaze for 3 full seconds after I fastened the watch, her eyes carrying a message I couldn't yet read. Constance was already in the kitchen, preparing my evening tea. The watch ticked steadily against my wrist, 42 ticks per minute, mechanical and precise, counting down to something I didn't know was coming. I stood at the door watching Vivica's car disappear down the gravel drive, the October sun setting behind the oak trees I'd planted 40 years ago. The watch felt heavy on my wrist. My right hand trembled slightly as I raised it to wave goodbye. Inside, Constance was humming in the kitchen. The tea would be ready soon. The watch kept ticking. 10 days passed. I wore the watch every day just as Vivica had asked. I wore it to breakfast, to the beeswax factory, to bed. The message in her eyes faded into the rhythm of October farm work, and I almost convinced myself I'd imagined the urgency. Then the watch was gone. I woke at dawn on a Wednesday in mid-October and reached automatically for the bedside table where I'd placed it the night before. My fingers found only smooth wood. I opened my eyes. Empty space where the watch should have been. I sat up, squinting in the gray morning light. Maybe it had fallen. I checked the floor beside the bed, then got on my hands and knees to look underneath. Nothing. I searched the bathroom counter where I sometimes set it when I washed my face. Not there. Back to the bedroom, I pulled open the nightstand drawer, checked under the lamp, ran my hands across the bedding. The watch was gone. My chest tightened. I had put it on the table. I remembered doing it. I remembered the small sound it made when the leather strap touched the wood, the way the moonlight caught the white dial before I turned off the lamp. I remembered. Looking for something dear. I turned. Constance stood in the bedroom doorway, coffee cup in her hand, still wearing her bathrobe. Her expression held mild concern, nothing more. My watch. I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The one Vivica gave me. Have you seen it? Sakshami's. Ibatsis-pond." She walked into the room and set her coffee on the dresser. "I haven't seen it since your birthday, Horace. Where did you have it last?" "Right here." I pointed to the bedside table. "I put it right here before I went to sleep." "Are you sure?" She helped me look, checking the same places I'd already searched. "You were very tired last night. Maybe you put it somewhere else and forgot." I hadn't been tired. I'd gone to bed at my usual time, placed the watch on the table, as I had every night for 10 days, and gone to sleep. But watching Constance search with such apparent concern, I started to doubt my own memory. "I'm sure I began." The phone rang. I stared at it. The bedside phone showing 6:47 a.m. on the display. Too early for casual calls. Constance glanced at it, then at me. I picked up. "Hello? Dad?" Vivica's voice stripped of all warmth. "Don't look for it. Take nothing. Leave the house right now. Brent's waiting at the forest edge behind Warehouse 2. Do you understand?" My mouth went dry. Constance was watching me, still holding the corner of the bedsheet she had lifted to check beneath it. "I don't understand," I said carefully. "You will. I'm going to play you something. Don't speak. Just listen." A click. Then voices, a recording, tinny through the phone speaker, but clear enough. Constance's voice, but not the soft tone I knew. Clinical. Cold. "The dosage tonight has to be exact," the recorded Constance said. "We can't have him alert enough to question the paperwork." A male voice responded. The male voice on the recording belonged to someone Constance called by his first name. Lyle, a voice smooth and calculating as a man pricing livestock at auction. "And you're certain the conservatorship filing will go through? He's not showing signs of resisting." "He's not resisting anything," Constance's voice said. "The tremors are working perfectly. 3 weeks at this dosage, and he'll be symptomatic enough for Pennington to certify incompetence." I couldn't breathe. Constance was still in the room, looking at me with that concerned expression, asking with her eyes who was calling at this hour. 25 years of marriage can collapse in the time it takes to listen to 90 seconds of audio. "What about the daughter?" Lyle's voice asked. Vivica suspects nothing, Constance said. And if she interferes, what about the grandchild? There was a pause on the recording. When Constance spoke again, her voice had the casual tone of someone discussing dinner plans. Chloe stays with us if necessary. She's leverage. Horace won't fight if we have her. The recording ended. Vivica's voice came back on the line, shaking but controlled. The watch had a recorder. It activated when someone moved it from where you'd placed it. That recording transmitted to my phone 3 minutes ago. Dad, you need to leave right now. I see, I said, because Constance was still watching me, and I couldn't let my face show what I'd just heard. Can you do that? Vivica asked. Can you act normal for 3 more minutes? I looked at my wife of 25 years. Her hair was still slightly mussed from sleep. She wore the bathrobe I'd given her for Christmas. She smiled at me with what looked like genuine concern. Yes, I said. I'll take care of it. Warehouse 2, Forest Edge. Brent's there now. Don't bring anything. Just walk. I hung up. Constance moved closer. Who was that? That wrong number, I said. Someone looking for a Harold Langston. At this hour, she shook her head, smiling. People have no sense of time anymore. I had drunk that tea every single morning for a quarter century, and I had thanked her for making it. I'm going to check the barn, I said, standing. Maybe I left the watch out there yesterday when I was doing inventory. I'll make your tea, Constance said. You look upset. The chamomile will help. Thank you, dear. She kissed my cheek and left the room. I stood there listening to her footsteps descend the stairs, hearing the familiar sounds of her morning routine in the kitchen below. The coffee maker, the kettle, the cabinet where she kept the honey and the herbs and whatever else she'd been putting in that tea. Whatever had been making my hands shake. Whatever had been designed to make me incompetent. I ended the call and sat on the edge of the bed for exactly 10 seconds. Then my eyes found the ceramic mug on my bedside table, the one Constance had brought me before I woke. The honey tea she made every morning, still steaming. I looked at it the way you look at a gun that's been pointed at your head for years without your knowing. The tea sat there golden and innocent in the gray morning light. I had 3 minutes to get to Warehouse 2. I had 25 years to stop believing in. I left the tea where it sat, got dressed, ran cold water over my face, and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, 68 years old, hands that had built a farm from nothing, eyes that had failed to see poison at the breakfast table. 3 minutes. I walked down those farmhouse stairs the way a man walks to his own execution, slowly, deliberately rehearsing every word. The kitchen smelled like it always did. Coffee, eggs cooking in butter, October light streaming through windows. Constance stood at the stove, her back to me, spatula in hand. She was humming something. Morning. I said, sitting at the oak table my grandfather had built. Good morning, dear. She didn't turn around. I made eggs. Your tea is still upstairs. I'll get it in a minute. My voice came out steady. I can't find that watch Vivica gave me. You haven't seen it, have you? She glanced over her shoulder with a small smile. The one that looks like a flea market find no deer. You probably left it in the barn office. I watched her turn back to the eggs. That dismissal flea market find had seemed like affectionate teasing at my birthday party. Now I heard it differently. She'd taken the watch. She wanted me to think I'd misplaced it to doubt my own memory, the same way she'd made me doubt the tremors in my hands. You're right, I said. I'll check after breakfast. The honey shipment needs inspecting anyway. She brought the eggs to the table, scrambled just how I liked them. Set the plate in front of me with a kiss on my cheek. Her perfume was the same lavender she'd worn since our wedding day. You work too hard, she said, hand on my shoulder. At your age, you should be resting more. Let the farm run itself. There it was again. Rest. Step back. Let it run itself. Let her run it, she meant. Let her and Lyle take over while I became too incompetent to stop them. I ate the eggs, forced them down, made conversation about the weather, the beeswax contracts, shipping supplies. 25 years of breakfast conversations, and every single one of them reframed by 90 seconds of audio recording. That breakfast table oak built by my grandfather had held 25 years of morning conversations, and every single one of them was now a lie I had believed. I'll be in Warehouse 2, I said, standing. The new honey batch needs testing. Don't forget your tea, Constance said. I'll get it when I come back. I walked to the back door, put on my work boots, pulled my jacket from the hook. Constance was at the sink now, washing my plate, humming. Just going to check the new honey batch, I called. Back in an hour. Take your time, dear. I stepped out into October rain. Gray sky, cold mist over the fields. I walked toward Warehouse 2, the way I had 10,000 times, but I didn't take the main gravel road where the kitchen windows had a clear view. Instead, I cut immediately behind the equipment barn and moved through the thick rows of the old orchard trees. The heavy autumn mist and dense branches kept me completely hidden from any angle of the house. Constance had never paid attention to the utility paths along the south fence line. She managed the numbers, not the dirt. Walking briskly through the mud, the cold rain hitting my face, my mind was sharper than it had been in months. Adrenaline was burning out whatever residual sedative remained in my blood. I skirted the back of Warehouse 2, keeping close to the metal siding, and slipped through the tree line where the forest bordered our property. Brent's car idled 20 feet away, tucked between pine trees' exhaust, rising in the cold morning air. I ran. Brent leaned across the passenger seat and pushed the door open. I collapsed into the car, breathing hard, rain-soaked. "I get in," Brent said, though I was already in. "Vivica has Chloe. We're 10 minutes ahead of schedule." I pulled the door shut. He put the car in gear and pulled onto the service road that wound through the forest away from the farm. "Does she know I'm gone yet?" I asked. Brent checked the rearview mirror. "Not unless she's psychic. It's been 8 minutes since you left the kitchen. 8 minutes. In 8 minutes, I had walked out of 40 years. 25 years of marriage had ended not with confrontation or explanation, but with me crawling through a tunnel like a fugitive. Through the rain-streaked car window, I watched the farmhouse kitchen lights warm and golden, still glowing in the gray October morning. Constance would be at the sink now, washing my breakfast plate, humming softly the way she did when she thought no one was listening. She had no idea the house was already empty. In her mind, I was still in Warehouse 2, inspecting Honey, trusting her drinking the tea she'd leave on my bedside table tonight. In her mind, I was still the man whose hands shook when he lifted his morning cup. Brent drove slowly, carefully, like a man who knew we couldn't afford to attract attention. The farmhouse lights grew smaller in the side mirror, then disappeared as we rounded the bend. "Where are we going?" I asked. Brent's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Vivica's house. She has questions for you. And you're going to need to sit down when you hear the answers she's already found." I looked at my hands in my lap. They were steady now. No tremor, no shake. Just the hands of a 68-year-old man who had finally stopped drinking poison and started running from the woman who'd been serving it to him, with a smile for God only knew how long. The rain drummed on the car roof. The farm disappeared behind us. And somewhere back in that warm, golden kitchen, my wife of 25 years was probably pouring herself a second cup of coffee, completely unaware that her carefully constructed plan had just collapsed in the time it took me to walk through a passage she never knew existed. The farmhouse disappeared in the rearview mirror. Brent drove without speaking, windshield wipers cutting steady arcs through October rain. The sound of rain on the car roof was the first honest thing I'd heard all morning. We were on Highway 20 heading east when I finally spoke. "Tell me about Chloe." Brent kept his eyes on the wet road. "She's been at Vivica's since yesterday evening. Sleepover with Grandma excuse." Constance didn't question it. "Yesterday evening. While I'd been eating dinner at the farmhouse, my daughter had already extracted my granddaughter. Vivica had been planning rescue while I was still trusting my morning tea." "Yet when did she know?" I asked. 3 months, give or take." 3 months, July. While I'd been working the summer harvest, my daughter had known, had been watching, collecting evidence. That the watch, I said, voice-activated recorder, commercial grade. Vivica planted it in the office first, then decided closer was better. Brent glanced at me. "Your birthday seemed natural." My birthday. The watch she'd insisted I wear always, the urgency in her eyes. "How much does she know?" Brent's jaw tightened. "Everything. More than you want to hear on an empty stomach." I looked out at Iowa farmland rolling past in rain, fields like mine, lives that probably weren't collapsing in the back seat of a sedan on a Wednesday morning. The phone on Brent's dashboard rang. He answered on speaker. "We're 20 minutes out," he said. "Is he okay?" Vivica's voice filled the car. "Dad, are you there?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. "Yes, Dad." I pressed my fist against my mouth. The sound was short and silent, just air and something broken. I turned toward the window, but there was nothing left to hide. 45 seconds. That's how long I let myself break. Then I wiped my face with my sleeve. "I'm here, Vivica. I'm out. Tell me, how long has she been doing this? How much has she taken?" Vivica's voice wavered. "Dad, we should wait until you're here." "How long?" Silence. Then, "At least 18 months, maybe longer." We can prove 18 months of financial manipulation. The poisoning. Her voice caught. Medical evidence suggests 6 months of active dosing, maybe more. 6 months. Since April. Since spring, when I'd first noticed my hands shaking. When Constance had suggested I rest more, step back from operations. What has she taken? We'll go through everything when you get here. I have files, documentation. Silas is here. He's been helping me build the case. Silas, our family lawyer. How many people had known while I sat at that breakfast table every morning? Chloe, I asked. She's fine, watching cartoons. She thinks it's a special sleepover week. A pause. Dad, she mentioned Constance on the phone yesterday. Said Grandma Constance told her she might come live at the farm permanently. Have her own room there. My chest went cold. The recording. Chloe stays with us if necessary. They'd been conditioning her, preparing my 5-year-old granddaughter for whatever scenario they'd planned. I'm glad she's with you, I said. Brent took an exit toward Galena. The rain was lighter now, just mist. We'll be there in 15 minutes, Vivica said. Are you... She stopped. Stupid question. No, I agreed. I'm not okay. How long does it take to stop being a husband and start being a man who needs to know exactly what was stolen from him? But I need to know everything, I continued. Every file, every piece of evidence, every dollar she moved, every lie she told. You'll have it, Vivica said. I promise. Just get here safely. The call ended. Brent and I drove in silence through mist and Illinois morning. We crossed the state line. The road curved through hills that would be green in summer, but now were October gray. How bad is it? I asked. Marriage fraud to felony theft. Brent's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He didn't answer right away, which told me everything. Finally, Vivica has files, 3 months of evidence. You need to see them before we talk. 3 months. July, August, September. While I'd been living my life working my farm, eating meals with my wife, sleeping in our bed, my daughter had been building a case, documenting crimes, preparing for this moment. Is the farm gone? I asked quietly. No, not yet. That's why Vivica moved when she did. Another week and it might have been too late. Another week, 7 more days of honey tea and tremors and Constance humming while she planned my incompetence. 7 more days and I might have signed something, become too confused to understand. 7 more days, and Chloe might have had her own room at the farm permanently. Tell me one thing, I said. Is Lyle just her partner, or is he something else? Brent's jaw worked. Something else? Vivica will show you the photos. Photos. I looked at my hands in my lap. Steady now, no tremor. The hands of a man who'd built a farm from nothing and was apparently going to have to fight to keep it from the woman who'd shared his bed for 25 years. Galena appeared through the mist, small town, historic buildings, River Valley below. Brent turned onto a residential street, then into Vivica's driveway. The house was a restored Victorian cream and blue wide porch. Vivica stood in the doorway, backlit by warm light. I got out of the car. My legs felt unsteady, like the ground had forgotten how to be solid. Vivica came down the porch steps and wrapped her arms around me without saying a word. I held my daughter and looked over her shoulder at the house where my granddaughter was watching cartoons, where files full of my wife's crimes were waiting, where I would learn exactly how much of my life had been a lie. The rain had stopped. October mist hung in the air. Come inside, Vivica said quietly. Silas has everything ready. Brent's hands had tightened on the steering wheel when I'd asked how bad it was. He hadn't answered right away, which told me everything I needed to know. Finally, he'd said those words, 3 months of evidence. By the time I walked into that house, I would understand that the woman I'd slept beside for 25 years had been methodically dismantling my life since July. Vivica led me through the house, past the living room, where Chloe's cartoons played on muted television, past the kitchen that smelled like coffee and safety, down the hallway to her study. Vivica's study had been transformed into something between a war room and a crime scene. Her desk, normally covered with legal briefs from her consulting work, was buried under evidence files. Photographs pinned to a corkboard on the wall, financial spreadsheets spread across every surface. A laptop open with what looked like bank transactions highlighted in yellow, legal pads filled with notes in Vivica's precise handwriting. Silas Kendrick, my family attorney for 22 years, and a man who read every contract twice, looked at me over his glasses and asked how fast I wanted the conservatorship petition destroyed. I sat down in the chair Vivica pulled out for me. Conservatorship 042, filed 6 weeks ago. Silas said, turning his laptop so I could see the screen. Petition to have you declared legally incompetent due to advancing cognitive decline. Medical certification from a Dr. Vernon Pennington. 2 examinations, both documenting severe mental deterioration. I stared at the document. My name. Constance's name as petitioner. A doctor I'd never heard of, certifying I was incompetent to manage my own affairs. I've never seen this doctor, I said. I know, Silas replied. Neither has anyone at the medical board, apparently. Vivica's been investigating him separately. Vivica spread photographs across the desk in front of me. Surveillance photos. Constance and a man I didn't recognize standing together at the beeswax mill, my mill after hours. Different angles, different dates stamped in the corners. July 18th, August 3rd, August 29th, September 12th. This is Lyle Harlan, Vivica said quietly. He's been meeting Constance at the farm for 3 months. I have 93 days of documentation. 93 days. I looked at the photos. Constance leaning close to this man, their heads bent together over what looked like paperwork. Constance laughing at something he said. Constance's hand on his arm. Who is he? I asked. We're still working on that, Silas said. But he's the co-signer on a shell company that's been receiving transfers from your farm operating account. $87,000 since July. $87,000, 3 months, my farm's money. I've been tracking the transfers for 93 days, Dad, Vivica said. Every transaction, every meeting. I have photographs, wire transfer records, email, correspondence I pulled from the farm server. I looked at my daughter. Why didn't you tell me? Her eyes filled. Because you were still drinking the tea. My daughter had spent 93 days collecting proof that my wife was trying to kill me, and I had spent those same 93 days complimenting Constance on her morning tea. Your daughter came to me in July, Silas said. We've been building the legal framework ever since, documenting everything. The conservatorship petition gives us grounds for fraud charges. The financial transfers are theft. Once we get the toxicology results... Toxicology, I repeated. Vivica touched my arm. We need samples, blood and hair. There's a clinic 2 blocks from here. Dr. Merrick is waiting. The clinic was a small brick building with a discreet sign. Dr. Helen Merrick, the forensic toxicologist Vivica had contacted 3 days earlier, labeled each vial with the methodical precision of someone who had testified in federal court. She was maybe 55, gray hair, pulled back steady hands as she worked. I need a blood draw and hair strand samples, she said, preparing the equipment. Forensic grade screening takes 6 hours. If there's scopolamine or any sedative present, we'll find it. Hair analysis will show duration of exposure. Scopolamine, a name for what had been making my hands shake. How long can you detect it? I asked. In blood, 72 hours. In hair, months. We'll know exactly how long this has been happening. I rolled up my sleeve, watched her tie the tourniquet, find the vein, draw 3 vials of my blood that might still carry traces of whatever Constance had been serving me with honey and a smile. She cut a hair sample from the back of my head, labeled it, sealed it in an evidence bag. 6 hours, Dr. Merrick said. I'll call as soon as I have results. Outside the clinic, Brent was waiting in the car, but he wasn't alone. Chloe was in the back seat. She looked up when I opened the door, her 5-year-old face serious in that way children get when they sense adults are being careful around them. Grandpa, she said as I slid into the seat beside her. Where's your watch? The one Mommy gave you for your birthday? I looked at my bare wrist. The watch was gone. Left behind in a farmhouse I'd fled like a fugitive. Evidence now, I supposed. Recording device. Proof. I left it at home, sweetheart. She touched my wrist where the watch should have been, her small fingers gentle. Are you sad, Grandpa? Your eyes look like when Mommy cries. If you have ever tried to explain to a child why their grandmother is evil, you know there are no words that make it smaller. I'm just remembering things, I said. What things? Important things, things I need to not forget. She nodded, like this made perfect sense, then leaned her head against my arm. Mommy says remembering is how we keep people safe, out of the mouths of children. Brent drove us back to Vivica's house through October afternoon, turning toward evening. Chloe chattered about her cartoons, about the dog she wanted for Christmas, about how Jeffrey the beetle from my birthday party had been released into Grandpa's garden and was probably building his kingdom right now. Dr. Merrick had said 6 hours for results. 6 hours until I would know exactly what Constance had been putting in. That morning tea exactly how many days she'd been dosing me, exactly how close I'd come to whatever she had planned for the end. I told Chloe I wasn't sad just remembering things. In 6 hours, I would know precisely how many things needed remembering. Chloe's hand found mine in the back seat, small and warm and trusting. She had no idea that 3 days ago, her other grandmother had discussed using her as leverage, had planned to give her a permanent room at the farm, had calculated exactly how to weaponize a 5-year-old's love. The October sun was setting over Galena, turning the Mississippi River to copper in the distance. Somewhere back in Dubuque County, Constance had probably discovered by now that I was gone, that the house was empty, that her carefully constructed plan had collapsed in the time it took me to walk through a passage she never knew existed. I wondered what she was doing, calling Lyle probably, trying to figure out what went wrong, wondering if I knew. 6 hours. Then I would know everything. 6 hours. We waited. Vivica made dinner that no one ate. Silas left at 5:30, promising to be back first thing in the morning with emergency asset freeze paperwork. Brent put Chloe to bed in the guest room, reading her 3 stories about princesses and dragons. I sat in Vivica's study, staring at evidence files I couldn't process photographs of my wife, with a man whose name I barely knew, wire transfers stealing money I'd earned 40 years building. The phone rang at 6:47 p.m., exactly 6 hours after Dr. Merrick had taken the blood. Vivica answered on speaker. Dr. Merrick, wand, is de bon stand. I have the results. The doctor's voice was clinical, stripped of warmth. The hair analysis confirms scopolamine. 21 consecutive days, Mr. Langley, daily dosing. Concentration levels consistent with morning administration, low dose designed to cause subtle cognitive impairment rather than acute symptoms. 21 days, 3 weeks. I counted backward, early September, right when I'd started having trouble remembering where I'd left tools, when words sometimes took a second to come to me, when Constance had started suggesting I was working too hard and needed to rest. The blood panel shows it's still in your system, Dr. Merrick continued. She was dosing you the morning you left. Active metabolites are present. You'll need chelation therapy to clear it faster, but it should process naturally within 72 hours now that exposure has stopped. The morning I left, the tea on my bedside table still steaming, the one I hadn't drunk. How bad was it? I asked. The dosage, moderate, enough to cause the tremors you reported, mild confusion, memory lapses. Not enough to be immediately alarming you'd attribute it to age stress over work. Scopolamine at this dose is insidious. It makes you doubt yourself before anyone else doubts you. That's exactly what it had done. Made me think I was just getting old. Made me grateful when Constance suggested I rest more, let her handle more of the farm accounting step back from the demanding work. 3 weeks, Vivica said quietly. Why 3 weeks specifically? Dr. Merrick paused. There's something else. The hair root analysis shows benzodiazepines, mild sedatives going back 4, possibly 5 months before the scopolamine started. Different drug, same pattern. Daily dosing, morning administration. The room went very quiet. 5 months, I repeated. The benzodiazepines would have caused subtle effects. Better sleep, reduced anxiety, mild cognitive slowing. Things you might attribute to taking better care of yourself. Then 3 weeks ago, she switched to scopolamine, a drug specifically chosen for memory and cognitive disruption. 21 days is 3 weeks, but 5 months is 150 breakfasts. 150 mornings of honey tea and thank you, dear. And I thought you said, this helps me sleep better. 150 mornings of Constance handing me a cup and watching me drink while she planned the next phase of whatever she was building toward. Why switch drugs? Vivica asked the question I couldn't form. Escalation, Dr. Merrick said. The benzodiazepines created a baseline, established the pattern of him being slightly slower, more forgetful, more willing to accept her suggestions. The scopolamine is the active phase. It's what you use when you need someone to be demonstrably impaired for legal documentation. Legal documentation, the conservatorship petition, the examinations by Dr. Pennington that had never actually happened. She needed me confused enough that faked medical exams would be plausible. I said, yes, Dr. Merrick replied. And she needed the impairment recent enough to seem acute rather than long-standing. 21 days of worsening symptoms documented by a physician would be sufficient to justify emergency conservatorship intervention. I looked at Vivica across the desk. Her face was pale in the lamplight, hands clenched into fists. What happens after conservatorship? I asked, assuming she'd succeeded, assuming I'd signed the papers while too confused to understand what I was signing. Silence on the line. Then, Mr. Langley, once someone has control of your medical and financial decisions, they control everything. Your access to doctors, your ability to contest legal documents, your medication regimen. Your medication regimen. She could have increased the dosage, I said slowly. Yes. Until another pause. Scopolamine overdose presents as natural cognitive decline in elderly patients, especially if there's existing documentation of impairment. The progression from mild confusion to severe dementia to death would seem organic. Viveka's hand found mine across the desk. Her fingers were ice cold. Is this enough? I asked. For federal court, for criminal charges. Mr. Langley, Dr. Merrick said, and her voice changed, lost. The clinical distance gained something harder. I've testified in federal cases for 16 years. I've seen accidental poisonings, reckless endangerment, even passionate impulse crimes. This is none of those things. What is it? 5 months of pharmaceutical grooming, followed by 21 days of targeted cognitive disruption, timed to coincide with fraudulent legal proceedings designed to give the poisoner control over the victim's medical care and assets. That's not poisoning Mr. Langley. I waited. This is planned murder. The words hung in the air of Viveka's study. Outside, October darkness pressed against the windows. Somewhere in the house, Chloe slept safely in a room her grandmother had wanted to weaponize. Somewhere in Dubuque County, Constance was probably drinking wine in the farmhouse kitchen, wondering why I hadn't come home yet. Planned murder. Is this enough to bring to federal court? I asked again. Dr. Merrick paused for exactly 3 seconds. The line was silent. I looked at Viveka across the desk. Her eyes were bright with tears she wouldn't let fall. 21 days, I said. She was counting. I need to know what she was counting toward. Conservatorship hearing was scheduled, Viveka said quietly. October 23rd, 8 days from now. 8 days. In 8 more days, if I'd kept drinking that tea, kept trusting my wife, kept believing my confusion was just old age, Constance would have had me declared incompetent, would have had control of my medical care, would have been able to increase the dosage without anyone questioning it. 8 days from now, I would have been well on my way to whatever end she had planned. Thank you, Dr. Merrick, Viveka said. We'll need copies of everything for the prosecutors. I'll have the full report by morning, the doctor replied. And Mr. Langley, stop drinking anything you didn't pour yourself. The line went dead. That night, I lay in Viveka's guest bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around me. Brent's breathing from down the hall, Chloe's small snores through the wall, Viveka moving quietly in the kitchen below, making tea she probably wouldn't drink. Planned murder, 8 days to conservatorship, 5 months of pharmaceutical grooming. At 3 in the morning, I stopped trying to sleep and started taking my farm back. Viveka's study was dark, except for the desk lamp I switched on. The evidence files were still spread across the desk, photographs of Constance and Lyle, wire transfer records, the fraudulent conservatorship petition. I pushed them aside and opened the laptop. Langley Farm Contract Management System. I'd built it myself in 2003, back when I was learning to digitize 40 years of handshake deals and paper ledgers. The login screen appeared familiar, green and white, the logo I'd designed, showing a honeycomb and oak tree. I entered my credentials, not the standard owner account that Constance used for accounting and daily operations. The Supreme Owner Account Master Access level that superseded every other login built into the system's foundation when I'd first coded it, maintained through every software update since. Constance didn't know it existed. As chief accountant for 25 years, she'd had extensive access, could move money, approve contracts, manage supplier relationships. But there were levels above that. Levels I'd never needed to use until a toxicology report proved my wife had been poisoning me for 5 months. The system loaded. 37 active supply contracts appeared in the main dashboard. 37 partnerships I'd built over decades, supermarket chains, organic food distributors, regional cooperatives. Each one represented years of relationship building, quality guarantees, handshakes that became million-dollar agreements. Midwest Regional Foods, Great Plains Organics, Heritage Market Group, Cornerstone Natural Distributors. I clicked the first one, Midwest Regional Foods. My largest contract signed in April 2019 with Dave Holbrook after months of negotiations. 200,000 pounds of honey, annually 5-year agreement, premium pricing for organic certification. The contract details page opened. At the bottom, in red text, emergency suspension, supreme owner only. I clicked it. Midwest Regional Foods, I said aloud to the empty room. Signed April 2019, Dave Holbrook's handshake at the trade show in Chicago. He ordered whiskey and we talked about his grandkids for 2 hours before discussing honey at all. The system asked for confirmation. I clicked yes. Contract suspended. Effective immediately. All pending shipments frozen. Account access terminated pending owner review. I moved to the next one. Heritage Market Group, January 2015. The contract we signed in a snowstorm. Power went out halfway through and we finished the negotiations by candlelight. Click suspended. 37 contracts meant 37 phone calls Constance would receive in approximately 4 hours, and each one would tell her that I was not the confused old man she thought she'd created. I worked through them methodically, each one a memory, each one a relationship she'd thought she would inherit when I became too incompetent to manage them myself. Sunrise Valley Co-op, June 2020, right after the first pandemic wave. They nearly went under, and I extended payment terms for 6 months. Signed the renewal the day they got back on their feet. Click. Heartland Organics, September 2018. Tim Morrison's son took over the family business, worried he couldn't fill his father's shoes. I told him his father had been worried about the same thing 30 years earlier. Click. Regional Harvest Alliance, March 2016. The contract that saved my farm during the drought year. Click. My hands were steady, no tremor. The scopolamine was clearing from my system, and with it went the confusion, the doubt, the fog that had made me think I was just getting old. Every contract I froze was a door I locked between her and the farm I built, and by 3:17 a.m., there were 37 locked doors. I read through it now with clear eyes. The terms were worse than anything I'd ever agreed to. Pricing 20% below market rate, exclusivity clauses I never would have accepted, payment schedules that put all the risk on my farm. This wasn't a contract I'd negotiated. This was a contract Constance had negotiated, while I was too drugged to notice she was gutting our pricing power. Lakeside Premium Markets, I said to the darkness. September 2025, the contract I signed while being poisoned, the one I'm taking back now. Click, suspended. The system refreshed. 37 contracts all showing red suspension warnings, all locked, all inaccessible to anyone but me. I sat back in the desk chair and looked at the screen. The blue-white glow lit the study like cold fire. Somewhere in Dubuque County, Constance was asleep in our farmhouse bed, our bed probably dreaming about conservatorship hearings and increased dosages and whatever she'd planned to do once I was too far gone to resist. She would wake in 3 hours. Dave Holbrook at Midwest Regional started work at 6 a.m. sharp. He'd see the suspension notice when he logged in. He'd call the farm immediately confused and concerned. Constance would answer with her usual cheerful efficiency, and he would ask why the farm's largest contract had just been frozen without notice. Then Margaret Fletcher's replacement at Great Plains would call. Then Heritage Market. Then all 35 others, one after another, each one asking the same question: why had Horace Langley personally suspended every active contract on the same night? And Constance would realize that I wasn't confused anymore, that I wasn't drugged anymore, that I knew. I woke to 17 phone notifications, and every single one of them was about my wife's loving concern for my deteriorating mind. Viveka was already in the kitchen, coffee brewing, her phone on the table, showing a screen full of messages. She looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. She posted, Viveka said. She turned her phone so I could see. Social media Constance's account. A photograph. Me at the breakfast table, smiling, coffee cup in one hand. Morning sunlight through the window. I looked happy, relaxed. The caption, please help. My husband Horace left home yesterday morning and hasn't contacted anyone. He's been having memory problems lately and we're very worried. If anyone has seen him, please call. Praying for his safe return. Posted at 7:42 a.m. 463 comments already. That photo is from 2 weeks ago, I said. I remember that breakfast. I drank the 17th cup of poison tea that morning. Viveka scrolled through comments. Poor Eleanor. Alzheimer's is terrifying. What a devoted wife. Praying for your family. She posted this at 7:42 this morning. Viveka said, jaw tight. 463 comments already. People we've known for years, church members, farm suppliers, all telling her how sorry they are, how brave she is. I looked at the photo again. 2 weeks ago, mid-September, I'd been on the scopolamine for a week, having trouble remembering where I'd put my keys, forgetting meetings. Constance suggesting gently that maybe I should rest more. She had photographed me that morning, had captured that moment of me smiling while drinking poison. She's building the narrative, Vivica said. If you come forward now, she's already told everyone you're mentally incompetent. Every person who comments will testify that Constance was a concerned wife trying to find her confused husband. She had photographed me smiling at that breakfast table 2 weeks ago, smiling while drinking poison, because she knew she would need proof of my happy confusion when the time came to tell the world I'd lost my mind. The contracts, I said. She knows about those by now. Dave Holbrook would have called at 6. Vivica nodded, which means she knows you're not confused, that you're fighting back. And this is her countermove. Public sympathy, community support. She's positioning herself as the faithful wife of a man losing his mind. Vivica set her phone down. It's smart, cruel, but smart. I looked at the comments again, hundreds of them. People I'd known for decades offering prayers to the woman who'd been poisoning me for 5 months. I need to see the house, I said. Vivica frowned. Dad, you can't go back there. If she... Not in person. I stood. The security cameras. I installed them in 2017 after someone stole the tractor. She thinks there are only 3 visible ones. There are 11. Vivica's study. The laptop. I logged into the farm security system using credentials Constance had never known existed, like the contract system, like the underground passage, like so many things 40 years of ownership had given me. 11 camera feeds loaded. Barn, factory, storage, driveway, kitchen, living room. I clicked the living room feed. There they were. Constance and Lyle Harlan sitting on my sofa, the leather one I'd bought in 2010, the one that faced the fireplace where I'd held Vivica as a newborn, where I'd read Chloe's stories about princesses. Champagne bottle on the coffee table, 2 glasses, they were toasting. Vivica came to stand behind my chair. Her hand found my shoulder. Dad, you don't have to watch this. Yes, I do, I said. I need to see what I'm fighting. Constance was wearing the blue sweater I'd bought her for Christmas, her hair down the way she wore it on weekends. She was laughing at something Lyle said. He raised his glass. She clinked hers against it. They drank. Lyle's hand moved to her shoulder, squeezed. She leaned into him. On my sofa, in my house, while 463 people on social media worried about my deteriorating mind. They toasted with my champagne on my sofa, in my house, while 463 people commented on social media about what a devoted wife she was. How long has this been going on? Vivica asked quietly. The affair, I don't know. I watched Lyle pour more champagne. But the planning this isn't panic. This is celebration. Constance set down her glass and pulled out her phone, checked the screen, smiled, showed it to Lyle. He laughed. She was reading the comments, the prayers, the sympathy, the offers to help search for her poor, confused husband. 4 minutes, Vivica said, checking her watch. I watched Constance lean her head on Lyle's shoulder, watched him kiss her hair, watched them sit together on furniture I'd paid for in a house I'd built, celebrating what they thought was my mental collapse. 4 minutes and 23 seconds. Then I closed the laptop. Not because I couldn't watch anymore. I could have watched for hours and felt nothing but the cold certainty of what I was building. I closed it because I had seen enough. What I had seen was evidence. Constance celebrating with champagne at 8:15 in the morning, while her social media post claimed she was desperately worried. Constance comfortable and intimate with a man she'd claimed was just a business partner. Constance reading sympathetic comments and smiling, while the man beside her had helped her poison me for 5 months. And send that footage to Silas, I said. All of it. Timestamp, date, everything. Vivica nodded. What are you going to do? Nothing. Not yet. Let her build her narrative. Let her collect her sympathy. Let everyone believe she's the devoted wife of a man losing his mind. And then we show them exactly who the devoted wife really is. Evidence was all I needed now, and I had cameras in 11 locations she didn't know existed documenting every move she made. Let her toast with champagne. Let her smile at sympathetic comments. I had seen enough, but every second of that celebration was being recorded by cameras she didn't know existed. Every smile, every toast, Every intimate gesture with Lyle, while her social media post claimed she was worried sick. 4 minutes and 23 seconds of footage that would destroy the narrative she was building. I spent the next day building the case with Silas. Evidence files, toxicology reports, wire transfer records, the social media posts showing Constance's calculated manipulation, camera footage of her celebrating while claiming to be worried sick. Vivica drove to the farm at noon to retrieve financial documents I'd asked for, specific ledgers that Constance kept in the office records that would show the full scope of her theft. I waited at Vivica's house, reviewing what we already had, preparing for what we'd find. Vivica called me from the farm office at 2:14 in the afternoon, and the first thing she said was, "Dad, you need to see this right now." I switched the call to video. Vivica's face appeared on screen, pale in the fluorescent light of the farm office I'd worked in for 40 years. Behind her, I could see my desk, my filing cabinets, the framed photographs I'd hung, showing the farm's growth over decades. "What did you find?" I asked. "I'm in Constance's desk, the left drawer like you said." Vivica adjusted the camera so I could see. The drawer was open, filled with ledgers and files. "You said to look under the accounting records." "Pull them out," I said. She removed the ledgers one by one, setting them on the desk. Then she stopped. "There's paper," she said, "folded, tucked under everything." My chest tightened. "Show me." Vivica unfolded it on the desk, angling the camera so I could see. Lined paper, the kind from a legal pad. Handwriting I recognized immediately. Constance's neat script, the same handwriting I'd seen on grocery lists, birthday cards, notes, left on the kitchen counter for 25 years. But this wasn't a grocery list. "It's in her handwriting, Dad," Vivica said, voice shaking. "A list, 2 columns, moved and remaining. Dates going back to..." She paused, checking the top corner. "March of last year. March last year, 18 months ago." "Read me what's under moved," I said. My voice came out flat. Vivica's finger traced down the first column. Equipment trust, March 15th. Dollar amount, $94,000. Beeswax inventory surplus, April 3rd, $37,000. Reserve operating fund, May 22nd, $112,000. Dad, there are 17 items listed as already moved. 17 items, already moved, already stolen. What's under remaining? Farm title conservatorship required. Supply contracts freeze, then transfer. Primary operating account gradual withdrawal. Machinery assets liquidation post-conservatorship. Vivica looked up at the camera. "Dad, and this is a checklist. She's been checking things off for 18 months. 18 months meant she had started planning this conspiracy before I ever felt the first tremor in my hand, before the tea made me tired, before anything I could have noticed." "What's the date at the top?" I asked, though I already knew. The answer mattered more than anything else on that paper. "March 8th, last year." Vivica's voice broke. "She's been planning this for 18 months. March 8th. I closed my eyes, tried to remember what had been happening in March of last year. Spring planting season, contract renewals. Nothing unusual, nothing that would have made me suspect my wife was sitting at her desk, writing a step-by-step plan to steal everything I'd built. "Take a photo," I said. "Send it to me. And Vivica, don't touch it. Fingerprints matter." Vivica took several photos from different angles, sent them to my phone. I opened them, immediately zoomed in on the handwriting. Equipment trust, March 15th. The farm equipment I'd bought with my father's help 40 years ago. The first tractor I'd ever owned. Moved, stolen, transferred to some account I'd never authorized. Reserve operating fund, May 22nd. The emergency money I'd kept for bad harvest years, for equipment breakdowns, for keeping employees paid during lean times. $112,000. Moved. "How much total?" I asked. Vivica was quiet for a moment, adding numbers. "Under moved, $347,000. Plus the $87,000 in wire transfers we already found. Dad, she's taken over $400,000. $400,000 from a farm worth $500 million. Not enough to destroy me. Just enough that I wouldn't notice if I wasn't looking carefully. Just enough to fund whatever life she was planning with Lyle, while I became too incompetent to realize what was happening." "What's under remaining?" I asked again. Vivica read slowly. Farm title written in red ink. Supply contracts, machinery, liquidation, primary operating account. And at the bottom, she stopped. "What?" There's a date circled. October the 23rd. October 23rd. The conservatorship hearing. The day Constance had planned to have me declared legally incompetent. I had the wedding invitation in a box in the attic, same handwriting that wrote, Constance Eleanor Hayes with all my love, now writing dollar amounts next to the word moved. She's been crossing things off, Vivica said quietly. Look, Equipment Trust has a check mark. Beeswax Inventory has a check mark. Reserve Fund has a check mark. 17 items checked off in 18 months. 17 items. 17 pieces of my farm, methodically stolen and documented in her neat handwriting. The same handwriting that had signed our marriage certificate. The same handwriting that had addressed Christmas cards to our family and friends. The same handwriting that had written, I love you on anniversary cards. Dad, this is premeditation, Vivica said. This isn't opportunistic theft. This is organized economic crime. I looked at the photo on my phone, the paper, the columns, the dates, the check marks. March 8th of last year, 18 months ago. I did the arithmetic without meaning, too. 18 months is approximately 547 days, and we ate dinner together every single one of them. 547 dinners at that oak table my grandfather built. 547 times she'd asked about my day poured. My wine smiled at me across the table. 547 nights she'd kissed me goodnight before we went to sleep in the bed we'd shared for 25 years. And on March 8th of last year, she'd sat down with a legal pad and written this list, had drawn 2 columns, had started checking off the pieces of my life she was stealing. She had sat across from me at that oak table, asked about my day, poured my wine, planned my destruction, and I had never once seen it in her face. Vivica, I said, yes, put it in an evidence bag. Don't let anyone else touch it. We're taking this to the FBI. When I looked at the photo again, March 8th, 18 months, 547 dinners. Tomorrow, I said, first thing tomorrow morning, we're going to the FBI and we're showing them exactly what 25 years of marriage looks like when your wife has been planning to kill you since March 8th of last year. But now I had her handwriting her plan and her timeline, and those 3 things were about to become evidence. That weekend, I stopped counting dinners and started counting evidence. Agent Winston Prescott of the FBI's Economic Crime Division sat across from me, reading 20 pages of evidence without saying a word. For 10 solid minutes, and when he finally looked up, I knew he believed every word. The FBI Des Moines conference room was neutral long table fluorescent lights industrial carpet. Vivica sat beside me, evidence spread across the table. Agent Prescott read everything methodically, the watch recording, the toxicology report twice, Shell Company financials, Constance's handwritten plan, 10 minutes of silence taking notes. Finally, he removed his reading glasses. As this is everything, he asked. The watch recording, medical evidence, financial trail. Everything we've gathered in 2 weeks, Vivica said. Agent Prescott, 50-something gray at the temples, leaned back. Mr. Langley, this is no longer a family dispute. This is organized federal economic crime, interstate wire fraud conspiracy to commit murder, elder financial abuse. Pharmaceutical poisoning crosses state lines, scopolamine purchased in Illinois, administered in Iowa. Federal jurisdiction. What does that mean? I asked. I'm opening a case file, subpoena authority for Shell Company accounts. We treat this like organized crime because that's what it is. He tapped Constance's handwritten plan. 18-month timeline, systematic asset stripping, coordinated pharmaceutical incapacitation. This is enterprise. When a federal agent tells you that your marriage was actually organized crime, there is a specific kind of relief in knowing you are not the one who misunderstood what love was supposed to look like. How long until you can move? Vivica asked. 72 hours to build the framework, Agent Prescott said. But once I open this file, it becomes federal investigation. You won't control the timeline. U.S. Attorney decides prosecution. I understand, I said. You're certain no going back once I file this. I thought about Constance on my sofa with Lyle champagne and sympathetic comments. The tea for 5 months. Handwriting that wrote with all my love, now writing moved. I'm certain. Agent Prescott nodded. Then we have work to do. 3 days later, I sat in a small cafe 2 blocks from Langley Farm. Ruth Waller, who had worked the beeswax production line for 20 years and knew every temperature setting by heart, came to me with 2 years of silence weighing on her shoulders and fear in her eyes. 54 gray hair, in a practical braid, single mother. She ordered coffee she didn't drink. I heard through the farm network, she said, that you're building a case against Constance. I waited. I saw them 2 years ago, Mr. Langley, in the factory after hours, signing something on the beeswax production table. I should have told you. 2 years, before the 18-month plan, before the poisoning. What were they signing? Papers, legal looking. I couldn't see what, but she looked at her coffee. The way they stood together, his hand on her shoulder. I knew it wasn't business. You don't need to apologize, Ruth. I have a daughter to feed. I couldn't risk the job, but I can't stay silent anymore. 2 years meant Vivica had been watching my wife's affair longer than Constance had been actively poisoning me. I need you to do something else, I said. Anything? I pulled a folded paper from my jacket, unfolded it. A hand-drawn sketch, 5 cylindrical objects, precise measurements. What is this? 5 beeswax barrels, but not real ones. I need fakes. Outer layer authentic right color, smell texture. Pass visual inspection. Interior composition doesn't matter. Can you make that? Ruth studied the sketch. 2 decades of experience. You want something that looks like our premium product but isn't is verpapins in et berstot. Exactly. What's inside? Paraffin, maybe. As long as the first 3 millimeters are authentic enough to fool someone checking surface samples. This is a trap. Yes. For Constance and Lyle. Yes. How soon? 72 hours. Ruth ran her finger along the measurements. That's fast, but I can do it. 5 barrels in 3 days possible. One more thing. The FBI will install tracking devices, small ones embedded in composition. Can that work? If they're small enough, I can work them into the paraffin layer during cooling. I slid the sketch across the table. What do you need, Mr. Langley? 5 fake barrels that would fool anyone who wasn't looking for the difference. Ready in 72 hours. Ruth folded the sketch, tucked it in her pocket. You'll have them. She stood to leave, paused. I'm sorry for not speaking sooner. You're speaking now. That's what matters. She nodded, left. I sat alone with cold coffee and a plan. The fake barrels would look perfect on the outside, authentic color, proper smell, expected texture. But inside cheap paraffin. And embedded in that paraffin FBI tracking devices, smaller than grains of rice. All I needed was bait to make her take them. I pulled out my phone, texted Vivica, tell Agent Prescott we're ready, 72 hours. She responded, what's the bait? I looked out at the farm I'd built 40 years ago, at the beeswax factory where Vivica had seen my wife and her co-conspirator signing papers 2 years ago. I typed something valuable enough that she can't resist, something she thinks I don't know she wants. Which is, I thought about the handwritten plan, the moved and remaining columns, items she'd checked off, ones she was still counting on. The farm itself, I typed. We're going to make her think she's won. Vivica's response came fast. I looked at the sketch. Vivica had taken 5 fake barrels that would track Constance's every move once she stole them. Watch recording caught her discussing the beeswax inventory, I typed. She thinks it's worth hundreds of thousands, thinks it's the one thing I haven't secured yet. We're going to let her believe she can take it before I lock everything down. And when she takes the bait, then we'll know exactly where she moves it, who helps her, how deep this conspiracy goes. And the FBI will have federal tracking evidence that she's actively stealing assets while claiming I'm the one who's confused. As I finished my coffee, it was cold and bitter and perfect. 72 hours until the trap was set. 72 hours until Constance would have to choose between walking away from $500,000 in beeswax or proving exactly what she was willing to steal from the husband she'd been poisoning. 72 hours can feel like 72 years when you're building a trap for your wife. Vivica and I met at Warehouse 3 at dawn. My daughter had driven out before sunrise, leaving Brent with Chloe, not saying a word about the risk. The warehouse was cold, our breath misting. Power tools on the workbench, 5 wooden barrel frames waiting, and genuine Langley Farm beeswax, the last honest thing we'd use. As the coating has to be at least 3 millimeters thick, Vivica said, studying the barrel frame. Anyone who cracks the surface for a sample will find real beeswax. She'd worked with beeswax her whole life, knew the temperature, the color variations, the smell, sweet and clean and honest. Everything Constance's tea hadn't been. We worked in silence. Vivica heated genuine beeswax while I prepared the Core's cheap paraffin that would pass surface inspection. Weight them right, seal them professionally, stamp them with authentic markings. How thick is the paraffin core? I asked. 97% of each barrel's volume, Vivica said. The beeswax coating maintains authenticity. When someone tests it, they'll find what they expect. Unless they melted the whole thing. But Constance wouldn't. She'd verify the surface and move it to wherever she was hiding stolen assets. And the FBI would track every mile. Agent Prescott arrived at 8 with a briefcase. Inside, 5 objects smaller than grains of rice. Nanochip trackers. Ah, these are invisible to the naked eye, I asked. Prescott nodded. Embedded in the paraffin during cooling, even if someone melts a surface sample, they won't notice. Smaller than a grain of salt. Transmits GPS, detects handling, sends data every 6 hours. We worked methodically. Vivica poured paraffin into each barrel frame. Prescott placed a nanochip in the center before it cooled. Then Vivica applied the beeswax coating, brushing it on in layers building up 3 millimeters of authenticity. Dad, Vivica said quietly, do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me? I set down the heat gun, looked at my daughter, 40 years old. Eyes like her mother's, my first wife who died 14 years ago. I don't know, sweetheart, I said honestly. But I know we're doing the right thing now. She nodded, went back to work. The warehouse suddenly felt too warm. I stepped outside for air and saw morning frost still clinging to the oak trees along the property line, the same trees I'd planted with my first wife 40 years ago. They'd survived drought storms and Iowa winters. I wondered if I would survive this. By noon, we had 5 perfect fake barrels, stamped with Langley Farm markings, proper weight, authentic smell, and inside each one, a tracking device. Now I needed bait. That afternoon, I sat in my farmhouse office with the door open. Constance was somewhere in the house. I picked up my phone, dialed Agent Prescott's burner phone, spoke loudly enough to carry into the hallway. Yes, the vault in the old dairy barn foundation, I said to dead air. Grandfather built it in 1947. The key's been in my desk for years. I should put it somewhere safer. But it's worked fine for 78 years. Pause, pretending to listen. 2.3 million in bearer bonds and gold eagles. I want it included in the estate revision, especially now that I'm, well, given my recent health issues. Another pause. Yes, I understand. We'll schedule the paperwork revision for next week. I ended the call, opened my desk's top drawer, and placed a vintage key inside, actually from an old tractor lockbox. Left the drawer slightly ajar. Stood, walked out, headed to the south fields. Did not look back. 4 hours later, Agent Prescott called. Mr. Langley, she took the bait. I was in the equipment barn alone. How fast? 17 minutes after you left your office, she called Harlan. We have the full transcript. What did she say? Exact quote, there's a spare key in his office drawer. He leaves it unlocked when he's in the south fields. Tomorrow night when he takes his medication and goes to bed early. Tomorrow night. She was planning to rob me tomorrow night, while I was supposedly medicated and asleep. I remembered our 15th wedding anniversary. Constance had given me a leather desk organizer with my initials embossed in gold. It sat 6 inches from where I'd planted the fake key. She'd written in the card, "To my rock, my partner, my forever." The card was still in the drawer underneath yellow with age. There's more, Prescott said. His voice changed. Harlan said something else. He told her to be smart like last time. Last time. The equipment barn went very quiet. Last time, I repeated. That's what he said. Be smart like last time. Mr. Langley, what else might they have done? I closed my eyes. 40 years of building, 25 years of marriage, 18 months of documented planning, 5 months of poisoning, 2 years of secret meetings. What else had I missed? I don't know, I said, but we need to find out. I'll pull complete financial records going back 5 years, Prescott said. Every transaction, every account. If there was a last time, we'll find it. Start with major transactions, I said. Anything over 50,000, property transfers, insurance claims, anything requiring my signature, or that could have been forged. Already on it, I'll have preliminary results by morning. Last time, I repeated into the phone. What the hell did they do last time? Prescott was quiet. Then, Mr. Langley, people who say, like last time, have practiced. This isn't their first conspiracy, it's just the first one you've caught. I hung up. Stood in the equipment barn where I'd stored tractors for 40 years. where I'd taught both my daughters how to maintain machinery, where I'd built a life I thought was solid. Be smart like last time. Constance and Lyle had done this before, successfully, and I'd never known. The trap was set, the fake barrels were ready, the bait was planted. But now, I wasn't just catching them trying to steal from me. I was uncovering how many times they already had. Mr. Langley, your wife's petition claims you underwent 2 psychiatric examinations, Silas said, tapping the first document. July 19th and September 3rd this year. Dr. Pennington describes you as disoriented, confused, unable to manage affairs. I remembered those dates. July 19th, Iowa Farmers Coalition meeting, September 3rd, State Fair judging. I was never examined, I said. Correct. Silas pulled out a second folder. July 19th, you gave the keynote address at the Iowa Farmers Coalition Conference. 47 witnesses, video recording. You spoke 37 minutes without notes about sustainable farming. Vivica added a photograph to the board me at the podium, gesturing toward a PowerPoint slide. September 3rd, I asked. State Fair livestock competition. You judged Holsteins for 6 hours. Silas produced newspaper clippings. 43 photographs from the Des Moines Register. Timestamps match exactly when Dr. Pennington claims you were in his office 300 miles away, unable to spell your name. I thought of Constance kissing my cheek those mornings, telling me to drive safely. She'd known exactly where I was going. She'd fabricated appointments that coincided with my most public activities. She'd been that confident. Vivica handed me one of the reports. I read Dr. Pennington's description. Patient became agitated when asked simple arithmetic. Could not recall his wife's maiden name. Insisted he owned a farm worth $50 million, clear delusion of grandeur. And how much did she pay him? I asked. We're tracing that, Silas said. But Agent Prescott forwarded this to the medical board. Dr. Pennington's license will be suspended by week's end. The conservatorship petition is dead. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt the weight of calculation. Constance hadn't made a careless mistake. She'd created documents so brazenly false they suggested supreme confidence in controlling my reality. There's more, Vivica said quietly. Agent Prescott entered carrying a laptop. He'd driven from Des Moines specifically for this. Mr. Langley, we ran background checks on everyone in your wife's contact history, Prescott said, opening his laptop to a genealogy chart. And she'd received a call from a stranger whose cousin I'd beaten in a land deal 15 years earlier. Gerald Morrison had tried to buy the Kellerman property 2,000 acres adjacent to my eastern boundary. I'd outbid him by 7%. He'd leveraged everything on that expansion, and when it fell through, he'd declared bankruptcy within 18 months. I'd attended his funeral 5 years ago, out of respect. Constance had baked a casserole for his widow. This isn't about money, I said slowly. This is revenge. Multi-generational revenge, Prescott confirmed. Morrison died bitter. His family blamed you for his financial collapse, his stress-related death. Lyle Harlan contacted your wife with a proposition: destroy your life, take your fortune, split the proceeds. Vivica's hand covered her mouth. Silas stopped writing. But Constance never met Morrison before his funeral, Brent said from the doorway. I thought of that casserole. The sympathy card in Constance's handwriting, her arm through mine at the memorial whispering, poor man, some people just can't handle competition. She'd known. Our interests. I'd thought she meant the family. Now I wondered if she'd been cataloging enemies even then. When did Lyle first appear publicly? I asked. Prescott checked his timeline. 14 months ago, introduced at a charity fundraiser as a new friend from book club. 23 months of secret planning before going public. The same time frame as the financial manipulation Vivica had uncovered. Does Constance know about the Morrison connection? Vivica asked. I looked at the genealogy chart. The phone records the timeline of calculated deception. 42 minutes on that first call. You don't spend 42 minutes with a stranger unless they're offering something you want. I already know the answer, I said. She's always been smarter than she pretended. Agent Prescott closed his laptop. We have surveillance teams positioned around your property. When you return home tonight, act normal. We need to catch her accessing that desk key. I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere. Constance hadn't just accepted Lyle's revenge scheme, she'd engineered it, refined it, turned it into something deadlier than simple vengeance. She'd turned it into art. The timestamp on the security footage read 11:04 p.m., and I watched my wife of 25 years move through my farm office like a professional thief. Agent Prescott had called me to the FBI monitoring station at dawn. The hidden camera captured everything Constance and Lyle entering with flashlights' beams cutting precise paths through darkness. 11:04, Prescott said. She went straight to the desk, no searching, no hesitation. She knew exactly where you'd put it. On screen, Constance crossed to my mahogany desk in 4 quick steps. No glance at filing cabinets, no pause at the bookshelf. She opened the center drawer, and her gloved hand closed around the brass cellar key. "Notice, Lyle," Prescott said. I watched him move to the wall-mounted cellar layout map. He photographed it with his phone, 2 quick shots, then stepped back into Constance's shadow. His movements were economical, professional. "He touches nothing else," I said. "Just the photograph." "Exactly. Watch again." Prescott rewound 15 seconds. "He stays in her shadow photographs, only the target maintains awareness of the door. These aren't amateurs fumbling through their first crime." I watched the footage loop. 7 minutes from entry to exit, no fingerprints wiped, no nervous glances, no hesitation. They'd done this before. This wasn't Constance's descent into criminality. This was a skill set she'd been hiding for years, maybe decades. How many times had she and Lyle executed operations like this? How many other victims had watched footage of their own betrayals? "They'll hit the cellar tomorrow night," Prescott said. "The nanochip barrels are positioned. We'll have federal agents in the tree line and a warrant ready the moment they touch those barrels." I nodded, watching Constance lock the side door with a key she'd obviously copied months ago. She touched Lyle's arm, brief, familiar, intimate, and they disappeared into darkness. Prescott froze the frame. "We pulled security footage from Morrison's widow's house. Lyle visited her 17 times in the 6 months before Morrison's death. This revenge plot started while Gerald Morrison was still alive. Outside the monitoring station window, Des Moines, morning traffic hummed past ordinary people living ordinary lives, where wives didn't poison husbands, and lovers didn't photograph basement maps at midnight. "Look at how Lyle moves," I said. "Stays in her shadow photographs only what's needed. They've rehearsed this." "Multiple times, probably." Prescott closed the laptop. "When you return to the farm today, maintain absolute normalcy. She can't suspect we're watching. One wrong word, and she'll abort." I turned off the monitor and sat in the darkness of Prescott's office, watching my reflection in the black screen where my wife's face had been. The man staring back looked older than 68. Looked like someone who'd spent 25 years sleeping beside a stranger. That afternoon, I sat in Vivica's garden while Brent worked inside, and my daughter coordinated tomorrow's trap. October sun slanted through golden leaves. Chloe played with her stuffed rabbit near the flower beds. She walked over clutching the rabbit, her small face serious. "Grandpa, how come Grandma doesn't come visit you at the farm anymore?" she asked. "Is she sad?" The question hit harder than the security footage. I'd prepared for federal investigations, wiretaps, criminal proceedings. I hadn't prepared for a 5-year-old's innocent confusion. "Grandma is busy with something important right now, sweetheart," I said, patting the bench beside me. She climbed up Rabbit in her lap. "Like Mommy when she works on her computer and says she'll play later?" Chloe asked. "But Mommy always plays later. Will Grandma play later too?" I looked at her trusting eyes, brown, like Vivica's, clear and honest, in a way Constance's hadn't been for years, maybe never had been. How do you tell a child that Grandma won't play later because Grandma will be arrested? "That sometimes grown-ups have complicated things to work through," I said. Chloe nodded and leaned against my arm, watching goldfinches dart between the bird feeder and oak trees. "I miss Grandma's cookies," she said quietly. "The ones with chocolate chips and those crunchy edges." I remembered those cookies. I'd watched her measure flour and vanilla with the same precise movements I'd just watched her use to steal a cellar key. The same hands that baked cookies had mixed poison into my tea. "I miss them too," I said, because it was true. I missed the version of Constance those cookies represented, or the version I'd believed existed. Chloe shifted closer, warm against my side. "Daddy says you're staying with us for a while, because the farm is being fixed. What's broken? Everything I thought, the foundation, the trust, the 25 years I'd built on sand. Just some old problems that need attention," I said. She accepted this with a child's faith. We sat together as October shadows lengthened across the garden, as birds settled into evening quiet, as the sun dropped toward the horizon and painted everything gold. Tomorrow night, Constance and Lyle would descend into my cellar. They'd reach for those fake beeswax barrels worth $2.3 million. FBI agents would emerge from the tree line with a warrant. My wife of 25 years would be arrested for attempted grand larceny fraud, conspiracy to commit murder. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and courtrooms and evidence presentations. Tomorrow would bring the confrontation I'd been building towards since Viveka played me that first recording. But tonight I just sat in my daughter's garden, while my granddaughter leaned against my chest, her small body trusting and warm. The rabbit's button eyes stared at nothing. Chloe's breathing slowed into the rhythm of near sleep. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that Grandma is stealing from Grandpa, that Grandma wants Grandpa dead? You don't. You hold her while October darkness settles over the garden. You memorize the weight of her against your chest, the flower smell of her shampoo, the absolute trust in how she relaxes into your arms. Tomorrow the trap springs. Tomorrow Constance touches those nanochip barrels and federal agents step from shadows. Tonight I just hold something real. Agent Prescott's text arrived at dawn. Barrels gone. Subjects en route to unknown location. Do not engage. Long line operation live. I'd driven back from Viveka's house the previous evening, kissed Chloe goodnight, and returned to the farm to maintain normalcy. Constance had been asleep when I'd slipped into the guest room. The cellar break-in happened at 2:17 a.m., according to the FBI's silent alarm. 5 fake beeswax barrels, nanochip trackers embedded now moving north. I called Prescott from my truck. Why aren't you arresting them? The barrels are moving north toward the river, he said. If we arrest them now, we get 2 people. If we wait, we get the whole network smugglers, buyers, everyone. However long it takes. Could be hours, could be days. I drove to Viveka's house and didn't leave for 43 hours. The first day crawled past in excruciating silence. I paced the length of Viveka's study, 14 steps window to door, 14 steps back. My phone stayed in my handscreen, lighting up every few hours with terse FBI updates. Subject stopped at storage facility Cascade, Iowa. Barrels transferred to refrigerated truck. Truck heading north, Interstate 52. Viveka brought coffee I didn't drink, brought sandwiches I didn't eat. She didn't ask questions, didn't offer platitudes. She just sat in the leather chair by the window, reading legal documents, a quiet presence keeping me from falling apart. Night came. Brent took Chloe to his parents' house. The house fell silent except for my pacing and the periodic buzz of my phone. Truck stopped Dubuque city limits. Subjects meeting unknown parties at warehouse. Surveillance holding position. At midnight, Prescott called. Mr. Langley, the barrels have changed hands 3 times. We've identified 7 individuals so far, including a known international smuggling operator. This is bigger than your wife's fraud case. This is a federal trafficking investigation. I don't care about trafficking, I said. I care about Constance. I understand, but we need to see this through. If we move too soon, the network scatters and we lose everyone. I hung up and pressed my forehead against the study window. Outside November, darkness stretched over Galena's sleeping streets. Somewhere north, my wife was negotiating with smugglers over fake beeswax barrels. Viveka appeared beside me with fresh coffee. You should eat something. I can't. She set the plate down anyway and sat beside me on the window seat. We watched the empty street together until dawn broke gray and cold. The second day was worse. Prescott's updates came less frequently. I counted ceiling tiles in Viveka's study. 42. I counted books on the legal shelf. 137. I counted my heartbeats between phone checks. 43 hours. I'd counted every one. 43 hours since she'd stolen from me for the last time. At 3:07 a.m. on the second night, my phone rang. It's happening, Prescott said, his voice low and urgent. Target approaching Dubuque Harbor. We're in position. I put the call on speaker. Viveka appeared in the doorway and sat across from me. Prescott's voice came through in whispered fragments. Subject 1 and Subject 2 approaching dock. Third party waiting with case. Subject 2 opening case, confirming cash payment. How much, I asked. Looks like stand by. A pause muffled conversation. $287,000. My farm's stolen money liquidated and delivered. Payment for passage. Payment for disappearance. It's Subject 1 taking possession of the case. Prescott continued. Moving toward cargo ship. We're going in 3, 2... I heard it through the phone. Sudden eruption of movement shouted commands amplified across water. All federal agents' hands where we can see them. More shouts. Running footsteps. Then Prescott's voice clear and official. "Mrs. Constance Langley, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted murder, and interstate smuggling. You have the right to remain silent." I heard her voice in the background, distant but unmistakable. She didn't cry, she didn't beg. She said, calm as ordering groceries, "I want my attorney." Like she'd been expecting this. Prescott came back on the line. "Mr. Langley, we have both subjects in custody. The harbor operation yielded 7 arrests total. Your wife was attempting to board a cargo ship bound for Montreal with the cash payment. Montreal, Canada, disappearance into international waters where extradition would take years." "What happens now?" I asked. "Federal arraignment tomorrow morning. The U.S. attorney will be filing multiple charges." Mr. Langley, she had a packed suitcase in the car, fake passport. This wasn't opportunistic. This was her exit strategy. I thought of our bedroom closet at her side, meticulously organized. Had she been packed for weeks? Had she kissed me goodbye each morning, knowing she was counting down to escape? "Thank you, Agent Prescott," I said. My voice sounded far away. "We'll need you for statements tomorrow. Get some rest." And just like that, 25 years of marriage ended with a Miranda warning, read over a phone line at 3 in the morning. I put the phone down on Vivica's desk. The screen went dark. The study fell silent. Vivica stood in the doorway, backlit by hallway light, her expression unreadable. She crossed to the chair beside mine and sat down in the darkness. We stayed there for a long time, without speaking. Outside November, wind rattled the windows. Somewhere in Dubuque, my wife sat in a federal holding cell. Her escape plan crumbled. There was nothing left to say. Agent Prescott called at 6 a.m. with news I hadn't expected. Lyle Harlan had confessed to everything before they'd even finished the Miranda warning. I'd slept 3 hours in Vivica's guest room after our silent vigil. Morning light crept through unfamiliar curtains, and my phone was already ringing. "Mr. Langley, you need to hear this," Prescott said. "Harlan gave up everything: the poisoning timeline, the insurance fraud, even the Morrison family connection. He said, and I quote, 'She planned it all. I just did what she told me.'" I sat up fully awake. He's trying to reduce his sentence. Probably, but his confession matches every piece of evidence we have. He's been recording conversations with your wife for the past 8 months. Recording her insurance policy. He didn't trust her not to burn him if things went wrong. I thought of that wiretap revelation, Lyle's voice saying, "Be smart like last time." He'd been protecting himself from Constance even while helping her destroy me. "There's more," Prescott said. "Dr. Vernon Pennington showed up at our field office 2 hours ago, walked in voluntarily. He confessed to falsifying your psychiatric evaluations." Pennington. The name triggered memory, the fabricated examination dates. He brought $78,000 in cash. Said Mrs. Langley paid him over 14 months to create documentation for the conservatorship petition. He's terrified. Says he can't live with what he did. Both of them. Both of Constance's accomplices had collapsed the moment she was arrested. "They both confessed," I said, just like that. "The moment the handcuffs went on. Without her, they're nothing." I arrived at the FBI field office in Des Moines by noon. Agent Prescott met me in the lobby and led me through security corridors to a conference room where manila folders were stacked like evidence of a life I'd thought I knew. "Dr. Pennington's still here," Prescott said. "Insisted on waiting to apologize to you personally. I don't want to see him." "Understood, but you should know he's devastated." Brought the cash in a canvas bank bag. I pictured it, a gray-faced psychiatrist clutching guilt money, waiting in an FBI office for forgiveness he didn't deserve. $78,000 in a canvas bank bag returned like borrowed sugar. That's what my mental competency had been worth. $78,000 to destroy my reputation, my autonomy, my right to control my own assets. Constance had paid it over 14 months, calculating patient methodical. "I need to show you something else," Prescott said, opening his laptop. "We've been analyzing the surveillance footage from your farm, all of it, frame by frame." He pulled up video from the hidden camera in my office, the one that had captured Constance and Lyle stealing the cellar key. "Watch her movement pattern here." Prescott's finger traced Constance's path across the screen. She angles her body away from the camera lens. That's trained behavior, not accidental. She knew where every camera was. I leaned closer. He was right. Constance moved through my office with deliberate awareness, her face consistently turned from the camera's sightline. "Then why did she let herself be filmed at all?" I asked. "Because she thought you were too far gone to understand what you were seeing. Look at this timestamp, October 14th, right after a high-dose poisoning day, according to Dr. Merrick's timeline. He pulled up footage from the kitchen, Constance preparing tea measuring drops from a small bottle into my cup, her body angled just enough to keep her face out of frame. She knew, I said slowly, she knew about all the cameras. For months, we think, but here's what's interesting. In early footage, she's much more careful, complete avoidance. But as the poisoning progressed and you showed visible symptoms, she got careless. He showed me footage from 3 weeks ago. Constance in my office rifling through desk drawers, her face clearly visible. Not careless, I said, confident. Exactly. Prescott pulled up the footage. I'd already seen Constance and Lyle stealing the cellar key. And here, look at this moment right before they leave. He advanced the frames one by one. Constance paused at the office door, turned, looked directly at the hidden camera. 3 seconds of eye contact, a small smile playing at her lips. Then she raised an invisible champagne glass in a mock toast and turned away. She knew I was watching, I said. Not just knew, she wanted you to see. This is October 28th. You'd been exhibiting severe cognitive decline for weeks at least publicly. She believed you were too mentally compromised to process surveillance footage, let alone organize an investigation. I watched the frozen frame of my wife's face, that smile, that contempt. Her arrogance, Prescott said quietly. She underestimated you. That was her fatal blind spot. I thought of all those mornings, Constance kissing my cheek, asking about my day, mixing poison into my tea. She'd watch me tremble and stumble, watch me struggle with simple conversations, believed her own manufactured reality of my decline. She'd been so supremely confident that she'd literally looked into my hidden camera and smiled. She'd looked into my camera into my eyes and smiled because she thought I was already dead inside. Mr. Langley, Prescott's voice pulled me back. You okay? Let's show me that footage again, I said. The moment she looks at the camera, he rewound, played it again. Constance pausing, turning, eyes meeting the camera lens. That small, confident smile, the mock champagne toast. 3 seconds of direct eye contact. She'd known I was watching, known and hadn't cared. Because in her calculation, I was too far gone to matter. The footage froze on her face, eyes meeting the lens. That smile. She'd been so certain she'd already won. Judge Hayes read the order aloud in a voice that carried 40 years of probate rulings. The petition for conservatorship is hereby vacated with prejudice, all rights restored to Horace Benjamin Langley. 2 days after watching Constance's contemptuous smile, frozen on surveillance footage, I sat in Dubuque County Probate Court while the legal system dismantled her carefully constructed lies. Judge Margaret Hayes, who'd presided over this court for 18 years, had seen every variety of family betrayal. This one, her expression suggested, ranked among the worst. The evidence before this court demonstrates that Mr. Langley was not present for either psychiatric evaluation upon which this petition was based. Judge Hayes continued her reading glasses, catching courtroom light. The examinations were fabricated. This is fraud. Silas Kendrick sat beside me at the plaintiff's table, evidence folders stacked before us. The defense table sat empty. Constance's attorney, Rufus Thornton, had withdrawn from representation after Dr. Pennington's confession went public. Furthermore, Judge Hayes said, the alibis provided by Mr. Langley are ironclad. On July 19th, he delivered a keynote address to 47 witnesses. On September 3rd, he judged livestock competitions at the state fair, photographed extensively by media. Dr. Vernon Pennington has confessed to accepting payment for falsifying medical records. The courtroom was nearly empty, a court reporter transcribing every word. No family members, no spectators. Constance sat in a federal detention facility 50 miles away. Judge Hayes removed her glasses. This court finds the conservatorship petition was filed with malicious intent to defraud Mr. Langley of his property rights and personal autonomy. The petition is vacated with prejudice, meaning it cannot be refiled under any circumstances. With prejudice, not just canceled, permanently destroyed. Mr. Langley's full property and financial rights are hereby restored, Judge Hayes continued. Another casualty of Constance's conspiracy. Another person who'd chosen money over ethics and now faced consequences. I felt no satisfaction, only hollow vindication. Judge Hayes signed the order with decisive strokes. Her gavel fell once a sound of finality that echoed off wood paneling installed when this courthouse was built in 1937. This matter is concluded, she said. I walked out of that courtroom legally whole again, but it felt like being handed back a mirror that had been shattered. Yes, all the pieces were there, but the reflection would never be the same. The courthouse lobby smelled of old wood and floor polish. Silas gathered his files at a wooden bench beneath tall windows that looked out on Dubuque's November afternoon. "Your property rights are fully restored," he said. "The farm, the assets, the business accounts, everything. They can never try this again." "Good," I said, though the word felt inadequate. "There's more." Silas pulled out a different folder marked with federal court stamps. "The federal preliminary hearing is scheduled for December 12th. Attempted murder conspiracy to commit fraud, interstate smuggling. Multiple charges against your wife Lyle Harlan and others in the smuggling network. December 12th, less than a month away." "Do you need to be there?" Silas asked. "Or does the evidence speak for itself?" I looked at him. 42 years old, former insurance fraud specialist who'd spent weeks building the case that just won in probate court. Now he was asking if I needed to witness the next phase. "Will my evidence be there?" I asked. "The medical records, the surveillance footage, the wiretaps, all of it. Every page, every frame, every recorded conversation," Silas said. "The U.S. attorney has built the case around your documentation. Agent Prescott says it's one of the most thoroughly documented attempted murder cases he's seen in 20 years. I thought of those months of investigation, Vivica installing cameras while I pretended not to notice my trembling hands. Dr. Merrick's toxicology reports showing deliberate calculated poisoning, the wiretap recordings of Constance planning my destruction. "Then I'll be there," I said. Silas nodded like he'd expected that answer. "The hearing is mostly procedural. The judge determines if there's sufficient evidence to proceed to trial. With what we have, that's a formality." He paused, watching me carefully. "But you'll see her. Constance will be transported from detention for the hearing. You'll be in the same courtroom." I hadn't seen my wife since the night before her arrest, when I'd returned to the farm to maintain normalcy and she'd been asleep. That felt like years ago, instead of weeks. I'd watched her on surveillance footage, listened to her voice on wiretap recordings, read her handwritten asset lists, calculating my worth like an accountant. But I hadn't looked her in the eyes since learning the full scope of her betrayal. Outside the courthouse windows, November light slanted across the Mississippi River Valley. Farmers were finishing harvest securing equipment for winter, preparing for the dormant season, when land rests before spring. I'd spent 25 years building something with Constance. She'd spent at least 18 months planning to destroy it, and me along with it. The legal system had given me back my property today. December 12th would determine if it could give me justice. December 12th, 28 days. I marked it in my mind like a surgeon marking an incision point. "The hearing will be difficult," Silas said quietly. "Seeing her across a courtroom after everything she's done." "I know." He gathered his files and paused. "Mr. Langley, she'll be there too. Constance will be at the preliminary hearing. Are you prepared to see her across a courtroom?" I looked out at the November afternoon at the river valley, where I'd farmed for decades, at the town where I'd lived an entire life that turned out to be built on sand. "I've been watching her for months," I said. "One more time won't kill me." The visit request came through Constance's public defender. 3 days before the preliminary hearing, she wanted to see her husband one last time. I'd told Silas I'd been watching Constance for months. One more time wouldn't kill me. But I hadn't expected this a formal request for visitation at the federal detention center delivered via attorney letterhead, like we were strangers conducting business. Maybe we always had been. The detention center sat on the outskirts of Des Moines, concrete and razor wire against December gray sky. I signed forms passed through metal detectors, surrendered my watch to security. A guard led me through corridors that smelled of disinfectant and desperation to a visiting room divided by thick plexiglass. Constance sat on the other side, wearing orange prison scrubs. I barely recognized her. The woman who'd moved through my farm office like a professional thief, who'd smiled into my surveillance camera. With supreme confidence, that woman had vanished. This woman looked broken, uncombed hair showing gray roots she'd always meticulously covered, no makeup revealing lines I'd forgotten existed. Red eyes from crying, hands trembling as she reached for the phone that connected our sides of the glass. I picked up my receiver. "Thank you for coming," she said. Her voice cracked on the last word. I said nothing. "I know you hate me. I know what I did is unforgivable." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "But we had 25 years together. That has to count for something. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I loved you. Don't. The word came out harder than I'd intended. She flinched. Please, just listen. I know the evidence, I know what they're saying, but you have to understand it wasn't supposed to go this far. Lyle convinced me. Lyle convinced you. He made it sound so simple. Just the conservatorship, just protecting myself financially. Protecting yourself from what? From the husband you were poisoning. Oh, Wensi Bokur. Her hands shook. More tears. I was scared. You don't understand what it's like being married to someone so successful, knowing you'd have nothing if it ended. You had everything, I said quietly. The farm, the family, a home, a husband who trusted you completely. A husband who took me for granted. The words hung between us, separated by plexiglass and 25 years of accumulated lies. I looked at her carefully, searched her face for the woman I'd married, the one who'd baked cookies with Vivica, who'd attended charity fundraisers, who'd kissed my cheek every morning. I couldn't find her. Maybe she'd never existed. Did you know? I asked. What? Did you know Lyle was Morrison's cousin? When you started the affair 3 years ago, did you know who he was? Silence stretched long enough for the answer to settle between us like sediment in poisoned tea. Her eyes dropped, focused on her hands, on the phone receiver, on anything except my face. Constance, look at me. She didn't, couldn't. The answer was in the silence, in those dropped eyes. In the 25 years I'd spent believing I knew this woman while she calculated how to destroy me. I stood. That's what I thought. Wait, please. I set the phone receiver on its cradle, turned toward the door. Horace. Her voice was muffled through the glass, desperate and breaking. I'm sorry. Please don't leave me like this. I knocked for the guard, didn't look back. The last thing I heard was Constance sobbing my name. I drove from the detention center to Vivica's house and didn't remember a single mile of the road between just Constance's eyes dropping when I asked the question, the answer written in silence louder than any confession. 3 years ago, a stranger had called her cell phone. Gerald Morrison's cousin with a proposition, destroy the man who'd destroyed his family, split the fortune, disappear into a new life. And Constance had said yes. Not in a moment of weakness, not seduced into betrayal. She'd listened to that 42-minute pitch and decided I deserved revenge for a business deal I'd won fairly 15 years earlier. Everything after that had been building toward a goal she'd accepted from the first phone call. Vivica's house was warm when I arrived. Dinner was simple roasted chicken vegetables, bread from the Galena bakery. Brent set the table while Vivica brought dishes from the kitchen. Chloe was already asleep upstairs. No one mentioned tomorrow. No one asked about the detention center visit. We just ate together in comfortable silence, 3 people who'd survived crisis and come out the other side, changed but intact. More coffee, Dad? Vivica asked. No, thank you. This is perfect. And it was just sitting here normal, like families do. After dinner, I helped clear dishes while Brent loaded the dishwasher. Vivica made tea, and we sat in her living room, watching December darkness settle over the Mississippi River Valley. Vivica smiled. You've told me that story 100 times. Worth telling 101. She looked at me across her teacup, my daughter who had investigated her own mother's crimes, who'd sacrificed family peace for truth, who'd given me a watch that became the anchor of my alibi. Thank you for the watch, Vivica. She looked at my wrist where her gift sat, the leather band worn from months of daily wear, the face showing 8:47 p.m. Thank you for wearing it, Dad. Brent put his hand on her shoulder. Nothing more needed saying. The watch ticked on my wrist steady as a heartbeat counting down to tomorrow. I looked at the watch face catching lamplight, Vivica's birthday gift, worn every day through investigation and poisoning and evidence gathering. Simple proof I'd been where I said I'd been when Constance claimed I was incompetent. Tomorrow, that watch would sit in evidence box 14 alongside time-stamped photographs proving my alibis. Tonight it just told me it was time for bed. Judge Vera Ashford called the courtroom to order at 9 a.m. sharp, and I watched my wife of 25 years stand in federal custody to hear 7 felony charges read aloud. The watch on my wrist felt heavier than it had the night before. Evidence box 14 wouldn't receive it until after testimony. For now, it still ticked against my skin. The U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Iowa sat in Cedar Rapids, all wood paneling and federal authority. Judge Ashford, who'd presided here for 20 years, had the controlled presence of someone who'd sentenced hundreds of defendants and learned to see through every lie. Assistant U.S. Attorney Sarah Brennan stood to read the charges. 15 years of prosecuting white-collar crimes had given her voice the precision of a surgical instrument. At 7 counts, she said. Attempted murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, medical fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, interstate smuggling. The defendant planned, executed, and profited from a systematic poisoning over 18 months. Constance stood between federal marshals and Prison Orange. The broken woman I'd seen at the detention center had vanished. This version was rigid, defiant eyes blazing. "I was framed," she screamed. "He set me up 25 years of marriage, and he framed me." Judge Ashford's gavel fell once. "Mrs. Langley, you will remain silent or be removed." Constance's attorney touched her arm. She jerked away. "Your Honor." AUSA. Brennan said, "The prosecution would like to present audio evidence. The defendant's own words recorded during the conspiracy." My chest tightened. This was it. "Proceed," Judge Ashford said. Constance's voice filled the room, not broken, not desperate, cold and calculating. 2 more months of the scopolamine, and he'll be incompetent enough for the conservatorship. Then we take everything. Lyle's voice answered, "What if he dies before then?" "Better for us. Either way, by March he won't remember his own name." The courtroom went silent. I watched Constance's face drain of color, watched her turn toward me, eyes wide with betrayal. She hadn't known about the watch. Vivica's birthday gift hadn't just been alibi evidence. The watch contained a micro-recording device that had captured every conversation within 20 feet for 3 months. Her voice, her words, her casual discussion of destroying me. "That's illegal," Constance shrieked. "That's entrapment." "Mrs. Langley," Judge Ashford said, "one more word and you will be gagged." Constance broke, collapsed into her chair, sobbing, shoulders shaking. Brennan played 3 more recordings, each one more damning. Constance and Lyle discussing dosages. Constance and Dr. Pennington negotiating payment. Constance arranging her escape to Montreal. By the 3rd recording, Constance had stopped crying, just sat there staring at nothing. "Your Honor." Brennan said, "The evidence is overwhelming. 7 federal counts substantiated by surveillance footage, medical records, financial documentation, and the defendant's own recorded admissions." Judge Ashford reviewed documents in silence. On 7 federal counts, she finally said, "This court finds sufficient evidence to proceed to trial. Defendants are remanded without bail. The conspiracy and premeditation are clear." 20 years. Constance would be 85 when she got out. I would be 88 if I lived that long. Its farm title and all assets are hereby restored to Horace Benjamin Langley. Judge Ashford continued, "This preliminary hearing is concluded." The gavel fell. Marshals led Constance toward the side door. She didn't look at me, not once. Just walked away in prison, orange shoulders hunched. I walked out of the courthouse into December afternoon. Cold air hit my face sharp and clean. Vivica, Brent, and Chloe waited on the courthouse steps. 5-year-old Chloe saw me first. "Grandpa?" She ran toward me, pigtails flying. "Are you finished yet? Can we go now?" I lifted her, felt her small arms wrap around my neck. "Yes, baby, I'm finished." The simplest truth I'd spoken in months. "Where are we going?" she asked. I looked at Vivica over Chloe's head, my daughter who'd investigated her own mother, who'd given me a watch that saved my life. "Is home, baby," I said. "We're going home." 3 days later, I drove through the farm gate for the first time in weeks. Vivica stood by the beeswax factory with long-time workers who'd kept operations running. Nobody spoke loudly, just nods. Vivica nodded, I nodded back. The workers returned to work. I walked the farm alone, through the warehouse where we'd built fake barrels, down to the cellar where Constance had planned to steal imaginary treasure, through the factory where 40 years of business had built something worth destroying. The beeswax workshop smelled the same, 40 years of that smell wax and oak and Iowa dirt. It used to mean prosperity. Now, it just meant survival. I touched the walls I'd helped raise 4 decades ago, ran my hands over workbenches I'd built myself, breathed air thick with memory and loss. My wrist felt light. The watch, Vivica's gift. My alibi? The recording device that captured Constance's confession was still locked in evidence box 14 in Cedar Rapids. I'd get it back eventually. For now, the farm was enough. How do you reclaim a place that's been stolen from underneath you while you lived in it? I stood in the workshop, where I'd built my business, breathing familiar smells, touching walls that remembered younger hands. The watch was in evidence storage. Constance was in federal prison. The farm was mine again. But standing here alone in December, silence surrounded by 40 years of work and memory, I wondered what exactly I'd won. 14 days after the sentencing, I signed the evidence release form in triplicate and watched the FBI clerk disappear into the storage vault to retrieve box 14. The workshop had felt hollow without the watch. For weeks I'd reached for my wrist out of habit, found nothing remembered. Now Agent Prescott had called. The evidence was released. I could reclaim what was mine. The FBI evidence storage facility in Des Moines smelled of sterile air and plastic. Dennis Wolcott, the clerk who had worked here for 11 years, processed returns with the efficient boredom of someone who'd logged 10,000 pieces of evidence. Box 14, he said, emerging from the vault with a small cardboard container. One wristwatch, exhibit a 7, sign here, and initial here. I signed. My hand shook slightly, not from scopolamine this time, just anticipation. Wolcott opened the box and removed a clear evidence bag. Inside my watch, white dial, brown leather strap. Vivica's birthday gift that had become my salvation. He unsealed the bag and handed me the watch. The weight felt familiar in my palm. Right. Like a missing piece returning. I turned it over to examine the case back. 2 scratches, small but distinct. Parallel lines across the stainless steel. These scratches on the back, I said. They weren't there when I gave it to Agent Prescott. Wolcott leaned closer. Huh. Must have happened during processing. Sorry about that. Want me to get you a polish cloth? We can buff those out. I ran my thumb over the scratches, feeling the shallow grooves. They weren't from evidence processing. I knew exactly where they came from, months ago. Constance finding the watch on my nightstand after I'd worn it to the Iowa Farmers Coalition meeting. She'd asked why I was wearing that old thing instead of the expensive Rolex she'd given me for our 40th anniversary. I'd said Vivica's gift meant more. Constance had thrown the watch across the bedroom. It had hit the oak dresser and clattered to the floor. These scratches evidence of that contempt, that moment when my preference for our daughter's simple gift had enraged her. No, I said to Wolcott. Leave them. They're not damage. They're evidence. Evidence of what case is closed. Evidence of who she was. I clasped the watch around my left wrist. I'm keeping them. 2 scratches. One for the 25 years she stole. One for the life she tried to take. Wolcott shrugged and pushed more paperwork across the counter. Final release signature. You're officially done with the federal government. I signed the last form. The watch ticked against my wrist, steady and real. Oh, almost forgot. Wolcott reached under the counter and produced an envelope. This came for you through official channels, forwarded from federal detention via the defendant's attorney. The envelope was plain white, my name written in handwriting I'd seen on 25 years of grocery lists and birthday cards. Constance. I held the envelope without opening it. When did this arrive? 3 days ago. Had to wait for evidence release before I could give it to you. I nodded, walked to the hallway outside the evidence room, found a quiet corner by a window. The envelope felt thin. 1 page, maybe 2. I opened it. Her handwriting was shakier than I remembered. Prison life, probably. Or genuine emotion. With Constance, I'd never be certain. Horace, wo ist denn it began. I know you'll never forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I need you to understand, I did love you. In the beginning, I truly did. But living in the shadow of your success, your farm, your reputation, I lost myself. When Lyle came into my life, I was drowning and he offered a life raft. I kept reading. 25 years. Some of it was real. The early mornings watching you work, the pride when Vivica graduated, the quiet dinners. I'm asking you to remember the real parts, not just the ending. Please. Those years meant something. I folded the letter carefully, stood looking out the window at December afternoon, at ordinary people walking to ordinary cars. She wanted me to remember the real parts, but the real part was her looking into my camera and smiling because she thought I was too damaged to fight back. The real part was her voice on that recording, coldly discussing how many more months before the conservatorship. The real part was her accepting Lyle's revenge proposition on that first 42-minute phone call. Everything else, the cookies, the dinners, the pride at Vivica's graduation, had been performance. Background scenery for a 43-year con. I walked down the hallway to the trash can by the elevator, dropped the letter in. The letter landed in the trash with a sound like a door closing, final quiet done. I didn't hesitate. didn't look back, didn't fish it out for one more read. The elevator doors opened and I stepped inside. Outside the FBI building, December cold hit my face. Afternoon light slanted across Des Moines, sharp and clean. I stopped on the steps and looked at my wrist. The watch sat where it belonged, 2 scratches on the case, back catching light, familiar weight, time ticking forward. 3 floors up, Constance's letter sat in a government trash can among coffee cups and discarded paperwork. Her words about love and shadows would be emptied tonight by cleaning staff who wouldn't read them, wouldn't care. I didn't look back. I walked to my truck, got in, and drove toward Galena, toward Vivica's house, toward family that had survived. The watch ticked on my wrist, counting seconds forward into whatever came next. The beeswax furnace roared to life on December 18th for the first time in 8 weeks, and Vivica stood at the assembly line with the expression of someone who'd finally come home. I'd spent the week after retrieving my watch driving between Galena and the farm, checking equipment that had sat idle during legal battles, reviewing contracts that had been frozen when Constance tried to steal everything. Now the factory was ready. Workers were back. Production could resume. Vivica moved along the assembly line with practiced efficiency, checking temperature gauges, quality metrics, production flow. She wore safety goggles and work gloves, hair tied back, completely focused on the machinery that had defined her adult life. The first batch of refined beeswax emerged from the furnace, golden, perfect smelling, like 40 years of Langley family work. "Old batch 17. Vivica called out to the quality control station. "Temperature steady at 240. Looks good." I watched from the observation platform above the factory floor. The machinery hummed with familiar rhythm. The scent of hot wax and oak filled the air. The workers moved through routines they had performed thousands of times. Everything felt both familiar and new, like returning to a house you'd lived in for decades and seeing it with different eyes. Vivica climbed the stairs to the observation platform, pulling off her gloves. "Quality looks good. We're back on schedule for the January contracts." "That's good, I said. She stood beside me looking down at the factory floor. "I've worked this factory for 20 years, Dad. Since I was 18. This is your farm. It always has been, even when—" She paused. "Even when she tried to take it." I stayed on the observation platform watching the factory run. The furnace roared. The assembly line moved. Beeswax emerged golden and perfect. The factory smelled like it always had, beeswax and oak and honest work. Constance had never set foot in here, not once in 25 years. This space had stayed clean. Christmas morning arrived quiet and cold, December snow, covering the farm in white. First Christmas at the farm, with only Vivica's family. No Constance for the first time in 25 years. Chloe woke at dawn like 5-year-olds do, on Christmas running down the stairs, in pajamas, shouting about Santa. Vivica and Brent followed bleary-eyed but smiling, carrying coffee and the camera. I'd decorated minimally a tree in the living room, lights on the porch, simple wreath on the door. Nothing elaborate, just enough to make Chloe happy. "Grandpa, look what Santa brought." Chloe ripped wrapping paper with pure joy that knew nothing of poisoning or federal trials, or mothers who smiled into cameras while planning murder. I sat in the armchair drinking coffee, watching my granddaughter discover dolls and books and art supplies. Watching Vivica kneel beside her daughter, helping with stubborn tape, laughing at Chloe's excitement. Vivica caught my eye over Chloe's head. No words, just a look that said, "We survived, we're here, we're whole enough." I nodded, she nodded back. Brent made breakfast pancakes and bacon, simple and perfect. We ate at the kitchen table, Chloe chattering about her presents, planning elaborate games. "Can we build a snowman, Grandpa?" "The snow is perfect for snowmen." After breakfast, I said, "Let your pancakes settle first." "Okay." She returned to eating with single-minded focus. Later, after snowman construction and hot chocolate, after Chloe had exhausted herself and was napping on the couch under a blanket, Vivica and Brent sat with me in the living room, quiet, peaceful. Chloe stirred, opened her eyes, saw me watching her. "Grandpa, do you like Christmas?" she asked, her voice still sleepy. I looked at the watch on my wrist, 2 scratches on the back hidden under my sleeve, time ticking forward steadily, seconds turning to minutes, turning to hours, turning to days beyond Constance's reach. Yes, this year, dear," I said. "I like this year's Christmas very much." This year. The 2 words carried 25 years of Christmas mornings that had been theater. Constance performing the role of farm wife, doting stepmother, supportive spouse. Me believing the performance because I'd wanted it to be real. But this year was different. This year the tree lights weren't set decoration. The gifts weren't props. The family gathered in this living room had survived conspiracy and murder and federal trials. This year was real. Chloe smiled and closed her eyes again, content with the answer. I sat in my living room watching her sleep, watching Vivica and Brent clear wrapping paper quietly, watching snow fall outside the windows, over the farm that was mine again. The watch on my wrist ticked steadily, 2 scratches on the back, time moving forward, a family that had survived. I'd lost 25 years to a woman who'd smiled into cameras while mixing poison into my tea. Lost decades to someone I'd shared my bed with, built a life around, trusted completely. But this morning, drinking coffee while my granddaughter laughed, surrounded by family that had chosen truth over comfort, I had this. And this was enough. New Year's Eve came cold and clear, and I drove my family to Dubuque River Harbor Park to watch the last night of 2025 end in fireworks over the Mississippi. Christmas had been enough, but this gathering with hundreds of strangers to celebrate time moving forward felt necessary. A public acknowledgement that the year was ending, that I'd survived. The park was already crowded when we arrived. Families clustered on stone benches overlooking the harbor. Food vendors sold hot dogs and pretzels. A brass band played from a temporary stage. Chloe tugged Brent toward the cocoa stand. I want cocoa with small marshmallows, not the big ones. The big ones are too squishy. Brent smiled. Small marshmallows. Got it, princess? Vivica and I found a stone bench near the harbor's edge. The Mississippi stretched dark and cold before us, city lights reflecting on moving water. 2 hours until midnight, Vivica said. You holding up okay? I'm fine. Dad. I looked at her. My daughter who'd investigated her own mother, who'd given me a watch that saved my life. I'm fine, I repeated, really. She was quiet watching Chloe and Brent at the cocoa stand. Then, do you regret anything? This whole year, I thought about that, really thought. Did I regret marrying Constance 25 years ago? Regret trusting her through decades of breakfast conversations and charity fundraisers? Regret believing in a partnership that turned out to be reconnaissance? I regret believing too long in things I wanted to believe, I said finally. I regret not seeing what was in front of me sooner. And that's not your fault? No, let me finish. I adjusted the watch on my wrist. I regret believing too long, but I don't regret having been the kind of man who could believe, who trusted. Better that than becoming someone who trusts nothing, sees conspiracies everywhere, treats every kindness like a weapon. Vivica leaned her head against my shoulder. You're a better person than I am. No, I'm just older, had more time to figure out what matters. Brent returned with cocoa, 4 cups balanced carefully steam, rising into December cold. Chloe followed, already sipping hers, marshmallow mustache forming. Small marshmallows, she announced. Daddy remembered. The crowd grew as midnight approached. Families pressed closer to the harbor edge. The brass band switched to upbeat New Year's songs. At 11:55, the countdown began. 5 minutes, the announcer shouted. 5 minutes until 2026. Chloe climbed onto my lap, cocoa gripped in both hands. Vivica leaned against my shoulder. Brent stood behind us, hands on Vivica's shoulders. The crowd started counting. 10:987. Chloe bounced on my knees, pointing at the sky. Grandpa, are you watching? I'm watching, sweetheart. 6:54. The watch ticked on my wrist. I felt it, that steady mechanical heartbeat. The watch ticked once at midnight, 365 days, ending 365 days, beginning time moving forward whether you survive or not. 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year. Fireworks exploded over the Mississippi. Red and gold and silver, bursting against black sky, reflecting on dark water, lighting up hundreds of upturned faces. Chloe shrieked with delight. Vivica squeezed my hand. Brent whistled. And in the midst of celebration, Chloe pressed her ear against my wrist. Is Grandpa your watch? I can hear it ticking. It is bo. Es bo pixtorin bold. I smiled. Yes, sweetheart, it's ticking, right on time. Does it always tick? Always. 2 scratches on the back, but keeping perfect time. She accepted this and returned to watching fireworks, completely absorbed in colored light. I held my granddaughter and watched 2025 end in fire and light. The crowd dispersed slowly after midnight. We walked back to the truck through streets full of celebration, Chloe already half asleep on Brent's shoulder. Want to come back to our place? Vivica asked. Or heading to the farm? "They farm it," I said. "I want to see the sunrise there." She nodded. Understood. January 1st, 2026 arrived in darkness. I stood alone on the farm porch at dawn, cup of coffee in my hand. Not tea. Never tea again. The sky lightened slowly over fields I'd planted for 40 years. Oak trees my first wife had helped me plant stood along the eastern boundary, bare branches reaching toward coming light. Constance had tried to take this. The land, the name, the business. 25 years of my life. But Iowa Sunrise doesn't care about conspiracies. It breaks over the Mississippi River Valley, whether you're poisoned or whole betrayed or loved 68 years old, standing on your own porch, or 85 years old in a federal prison. The beeswax factory sat quiet in pre-dawn darkness. In a few hours, workers would arrive. Vivica would check the assembly lines. Production would continue like it had for 4 decades. The watch on my wrist ticked steadily. 2 scratches on the caseback, evidence I'd chosen to keep. Proof that some things survive being thrown away. I sipped coffee, bitter, safe, earned. The first light touched the oak trees. You think you know someone because you've slept beside them for 25 years, shared breakfast and taxes and Christmas mornings, built what looks like a life. But sunrise doesn't lie the way people do. This sunrise was mine. I'd built it with my own hands, cleared this land, planted these fields, raised these oak trees from saplings, constructed that factory from foundation to roof. Constance had tried to take the land, the name, the years, but she couldn't take the sunrise, couldn't steal the fact that I'd stood here at dawn for 4 decades watching light break over property I'd earned. This was mine, built with my own hands, and no one, no matter how long they sleep beside you, no matter how perfectly they perform, love could throw it away. The sun cleared the horizon. Coffee steamed in my hand. The watch ticked on my wrist. Time moved forward. And I was still here. And to you listening to my story, remember this survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about reclaiming who you are after someone tries to destroy you. I made a mistake that nearly cost me everything. I trusted without questioning. I believed performance was reality. For 25 years, I thought I knew the woman who made my tea every morning. Don't make my mistake. Trust, yes, but verify. Love, yes, but watch. When your body tells you something is wrong, listen. When family warns you, don't dismiss it. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any wound because it comes from where you thought you were safe. But here's what I learned: the same family that betrays you can also save you. My daughter saw what I couldn't acted when I was too trusting. That watch wasn't just evidence, it was proof someone loved me enough to fight for my life. I believe God put me through this to show me that evil wears familiar faces, but so does grace. The farm I nearly lost is mine. The sunrise I almost stopped seeing breaks every morning. If this story resonated with you, I'd be grateful if you'd leave a comment. Have you faced family betrayal? How did you survive it? Your story might help someone else who's listening right now. Please share this video with anyone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already subscribed to Revenge Dad, we're building a community of survivors here. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time matters, and I'm honored you spent it here. One final note. Some details in this story have been fictionalized to protect privacy and strengthen the message. But the core truth about survival, about family betrayal, about reclaiming your life, that's real.